Hello, everybody. Welcome to Lorebeards and Roleplaying. Vera is coming. She's just been a little bit delayed by technical difficulties, and it's a bit. I feel like this show we get like a topic that I'm really super excited to talk about. I'm like, oh, I can't wait to talk about this thing, and it's like a monkey's paw because like every time I get that, like something goes wrong, technically speaking. But Vera, she is on her way. I promise. Until then, you just have to put up with me talking about role-playing games. But if you're new to the channel, or if you've never listened to one of our episodes before, you're probably wondering, who is this guy? Why should I listen to what he's got to say? So I am Ross Watson. I am a game designer and author. I've written a whole bunch of role-playing game books. Like the highlights are Torg Eternity, Savage Worlds Rifts, Star Wars Edge of the Empire, a whole bunch of Savage Worlds products, honestly. It's too many to list. And all the Warhammer 40k role-playing game lines, with the exception of Imperium Maledictum, I think is the only one I haven't actually worked on. Oh, that and Dark Heresy 2nd Edition. Didn't work on either of those. But I worked on all the other ones. And if you like Dark Heresy, great. If you like Rogue Trader, it's my fault. If you like Death Watch, it's my fault. So forth and so on. So that's who I am. That's why I'm excited to talk about role-playing games, because it's been a big part of my life. I cannot believe I have been doing this job professionally for 26 years. It's pretty wild. We got a question here from Skylar Martin. What's the one you won an award for? I've won a bunch of awards, so there's a bunch of awards. I don't want to go through all of them. Let's just say I have won some awards, and I'm happy about that. The thing about role-playing game creation is that it's a team effort. Now I've been like, lead designer, lead developer. I've been kind of like the captain of the ship, for Rogue Trader. But anybody who's played Rogue Trader knows you got to have a crew to get where you're going. And the awards that I've won are not just, I would say I've won. The awards that have been given to the products I've worked on belong as much to the artists and the writers and the editors as they do to me. It is a team effort. Anyway, we've got an interesting show for you guys today, and I'm going to start out with kind of a provocative statement. I don't often make big, broad, general statements, but I'm going to make one today because I feel like the topic today deserves it, just to kind of get everybody, you get your ears perked up and realize what we're talking about is super deep, and that is almost every piece of entertainment that you consumed this week. It is the likelihood is approaching certitude that there are RPG fingerprints on it from the tabletop industry, and most people have no idea. And that's why I talked to Vera about doing a show today about the influences of tabletop role-playing games, because they are pervasive. It's D&D has been around for over 50 years at this point. And for any of you guys who were not around in the late 70s, early 80s, it was big. It was really big. There was like a 60 Minutes episode about it. There was a massive scare called the Satanic Panic. Pat Robertson and the 700 Club were like railing against it, calling it, a tool of Satan. And all of that negative attention actually just pushed it right up to the forefront of pop culture. It was huge. I started gaming with it back in 83, which was, there's Vera. Hey, good timing.
Hi. Hello.
Hello, Vera.
Brief delay.
No, it's great. I'm so glad you're here. Honestly, so glad.
Hello.
I just introduced the concept of the topic, and I introduced myself. So for people who are listening and don't know who you are, Vera, who are you?
Oh, good timing. Hi, I'm Vera. I am one of the writers for the Warhammer Fantasy tabletop games. I work on the Old World, Age of Sigmar Soulbound, and especially 4th edition. I make stuff and do things. I'm also a online thing doer.
I am extremely excited to see that Vera's. It's so cool that we have a new generation of designers. I know I'm a man of a certain age. I've been around a while. I mean, I'm no Zeb Cook. I'm no Gary Gygax, but I've been around for a while. So I mean, if you count Zeb and Gary as like the first generation, I'm probably second or third, and that makes Vera like third or fourth, typically generation. And it's super cool to see that. Like, also for anybody who doesn't know, back in the early days, this was a sausage party of a hobby. There was hardly any women involved, so it's so cool. It's so exciting. We'll talk about how we got there to like a bunch of women getting into the hobby, but I'm very proud and happy to have Vera as my co-host, because she's not only a woman designer, she's extremely talented and excited about this hobby that we both love.
Yeah, like I've only just started a few years back developing properly. I've been a writer all my life, but it's been a cool journey. It's been a cool journey. And I can say confidently, I'm not the only girl in any of my tabletop groups, which is cool.
Yeah, well, and I think one of the things we're going to talk about today is how that happened, which I will attribute largely to the White Wolf explosion in the 90s. That's where it seemed to me that the table gender ratio started to change. So
yeah, I can see that. There were a few different eras of like media coverage of tabletop games, of the structure of the games themselves, and I guess we could start like all the way back with what influenced D&D to begin with.
Yeah, I while you were gone, I made a bold statement.
Really?
I said the through line for this episode is that almost every piece of entertainment that any of our watchers have enjoyed this week, it's the likelihood is approaching certitude that there's tabletop RPG fingerprints on any of that content, and most people don't even know.
You know what? That is a bold statement. It's a wide statement. I think it is quite possibly an accurate statement.
Well, so by the way, I see you're doing pink instead of green today, which is lovely.
Yeah, it is the Cherry Blossom Festival right now. So in DC, the blossoms are in full bloom as of a few days ago. So I've got a few petals falling in the sky as well. I'm feeling festive, I'll put it that way. Spring has sprung. It's warm out.
So I used to work for the National Japanese American Memorial Foundation in downtown DC. And so the Cherry Blossom Festival was a big deal for us at that time.
Sure.
So I love it. We'll have to talk more about DC sometime, because I'm sure it's changed a lot.
Little bit, yeah. I'm hoping to go like all the way into town sometime over the week to tour the tidal basin and see stuff and take photos.
Do you want to pick a particular area where you feel like RPGs have influenced our culture?
Oh man, just one.
Just to start.
If we're gonna start with like a place that I see a lot of influence, I think that the lit RPG and the adoption of like RPG systems in literature is broadly really interesting and quite topical right now. There's a ton of things in this sort of genre.
So ever since the role-playing games were a thing, novels about role-playing games have been a thing. One of the earliest is Quag Keep by I can't remember the name of the author, unfortunately, but she's a very well-known fantasy author, and that was one of the earliest ones that was basically like, hey, it's D&D, but it's a novel. And lit RPG started 10-15 years ago, something like that.
Yeah, it's been a more modern like movement as a genre in and of itself, but I think that it synergizes with certain trappings of fantasy writing from far previous to that, right? Like it slots in really nicely with a few strictures of like cultivation fiction, for example.
Yeah. Oh, so the author of that book is Andre Norton. Quag Keep is by Andre Norton, and it is one of the very first, 1978. It is one of the very first novels about that is based on role-playing games. Now, lit RPG is a whole genre of itself. I mean, there's some people call it progression fantasy or progression sci-fi, because it can be both. I am a lit RPG enthusiast. I have read several of them, and some of them are like stupidly good. So yeah, it's a genre just like any other, but it happens to have, character sheets and mechanics as part of the story.
Yeah, and it's caught on so deeply it's being subverted now. A few of the, I would say, most popular like anime series and so on recently are very much in this genre of writing, although they've sort of taken on their own life. Like I would say the isekai genre owes a lot to this sort of broad structure.
Well, anime in general. So I'm an anime enthusiast. I will wave my hand firmly in the air. Big anime guy over here. And anime has been deeply influenced by role-playing games. Does anybody here know the anime Overlord? One of my favorites, by the way. Overlord is freaking awesome. So Overlord was written as a manga. The creator, his tabletop RPG group broke up. And he wanted to write about that. He wanted to get that out cathartically. So he created this idea of an MMO where the last player was there for the last second and then became the overlord in the new world. So just so you know, like that's one little piece, but you can go all the way back. My introduction to anime happened in the 90s with a little show called Record of Lodoss War.
Yes.
And Record of Lodoss War is, guess what? It's somebody's D&D campaign that they decided to make an anime out of, and it's so freaking cool. It's just so cool.
Yeah, and like shows like Dot Hack are pretty well known, respected, awesome. Shout out to Momonga.
Momonga, yeah. But I'm gonna start a little bit more broad, if you don't mind.
Please, we'll come back to this, I'm sure.
I'm gonna start with someplace you probably wouldn't expect it, but it is definitely a big part of it. Psychology and mental health.
I had a book when I was a tiny child, like I want to say like 9 years old, called like older than 9, maybe like 14. Time is fake. Called like D&D and ethics, something like this, and it broke down like all of these different sorts of ethical concepts through the lens of alignments and through player activity in the world. And there were all of these articles that had been written about the psychology of role-playing games.
Yeah, there's actually a peer-reviewed study from 2024 from James Cook University in Australia. They tracked 25 participants through 8 weeks of D&D and found that it significantly decreased depression, stress, and anxiety, along with measurable increase in self-esteem and efficacy. It's a scholarly term, guys. I'm sorry, I don't know. Efficacy, I think, is what they're trying to say. And the improvements persisted at a 1-month follow-up. So it is a legitimate group therapy modality to play Dungeons and Dragons, which I think is so freaking awesome. Compared to what, and I mentioned this before you came on, but there was the Satanic Panic back in the 80s with Pat Robertson and the 700 Club talking about how it was terrible and bad for kids. It's been proven by science it is actually good for people. It's good for basically everybody. And I just think that's wonderful.
Well, yeah, because like the first box office representation of D&D, really, Mazes and Monsters, are kind of the opposite, where D&D will make you go super crazy. Well,
it made Tom Hanks go super crazy. young Tom Hanks, like pre-volleyball. Pre-volleyball. Yeah, thank you. What, Bosom Buddies? Was that the show he was on? I forget. There was like a sitcom he was on. It was before that. Hey, we got a quick super chat here from Skylar Martin. Record Lodoss War was my first anime. Later, I learned it's D&D. One of my first. Cool. Oh, the original Record Lodoss War is just so beautiful. And the music. God, hand-drawn animation back in the day. I'll just say I'm a fan. Is there anything you'd like to talk about with regards to mental health and psychology?
Yeah, like I've mentioned this before, but at the school I teach at, we have a tabletop role-playing club, right? And this is among the most popular activities at the school. It is like at capacity constantly because the kids are enthusiastic. We like this. But I think I've seen it had a really positive impact on a lot of different students because, like you mentioned, I think the tabletop games tend to have a really positive impact for all sorts of reasons. Kids can navigate social scenarios that are uncomfortable or difficult with the ability to put things on pause and like trace out those scripts for challenging interactions. They're able to take on the role of confident heroes. They're able to assume different aspects of themselves and play out different personalities, different identities, and so on. And I have seen it do a lot of good. There are kids who will just open up when they get to play a character for a little while.
Yeah, this is not a peer-reviewed study. This is firsthand from an actual teacher, which I think is awesome.
Oh, it's a beautiful thing. Seriously. I wish that more people got the chance to play tabletop games, especially growing up.
Do you ever have to talk to the parents about it and explain?
We are thankfully outside of the Satanic Panic era. I think there have been zero like complaints or concerns about the campaigns. There's a bit of a sometimes like, hey, maybe we shouldn't go here at the table. But other than that, it's been pretty all right.
Well, that's rad.
As a kid growing up, I played a lot of like pretend games and stuff, right? And at some point, I played with my stepbrother and my stepsister, swinging sticks around, reenacting little storylines, or playing on different kinds of settings we had come to love, right? Like trying to adopt those. And at some point, everybody aged out of it but me. And there I am, like 17 years old. We're going to prom, and it's like, hey, what if we like played a pretend game? And they're like, so it's been nice to kind of find my people as I've gotten a little older and started to get playing tabletop games properly. Because like when I was in high school, when I was in middle school, I collected 3.5 edition books for D&D and had no one to play with. So
did you have Complete Divine?
I might have, yeah. I have like a whole stack of these still.
That's the one book of 3.5 I worked on. So
oh really?
Yeah.
Huh, wait a minute.
Yeah, it's you know what? Talk to me about it some other time. I have a lot of stories I could tell about that book. But
exciting. We'll talk about D&D at some point, I'm sure.
I sure hope so. Stefan Rowe has a really interesting comment. Do you want to read it?
Yeah, Stefan says, not gonna lie, tabletop RPGs and LARPing made me a more sociable guy, helped me overcome anxieties, and helped me become more open. Yeah, I could certainly say the same. I think that there's just something about it, right? You get to enact bold and boisterous commands. You get to take on these roles of confident heroes, and that sticks with you because you've acted out that sort of structure. You know, it's play acting, but you're still taking on that mind space. You are assuming that role. You are playing that role.
I think it's definitely helped me come out of my shell. I can tell you that. If I could, I'd like to lean a little bit harder into the literature and creative writing side as well.
Oh yeah.
So the New York Times published a piece in 2014 about D&D's influence on an entire generation of writers. They quoted Pulitzer Prize winner Junot Diaz, who described D&D as a storytelling apprenticeship. And it's the place where he and immigrant friends in New Jersey learned to inhabit other identities and build narratives. Several writers that we know that are like super big names, not including Andre Norton, who have already name dropped, but just a few of the names of people who are deeply influenced by tabletop role-playing games: China Mayville, Cory Doctorow, Sherman Alexie, George R.R. Martin. If you're not aware, the Wild Cards books that he wrote are all based on a campaign he ran with his friends of Superworld, which was a superhero role-playing game from the early 80s. Lev Grossman, Holly Black, Brandon Sanderson, Jim Butcher, and many more. So I'm just, like I said, it was just like the very tip of the iceberg. But all of these guys, they were influenced by not just playing the game. Like the role-playing game wasn't just the reason that they became writers, anything like that. There's a deeper structural influence here. I think D&D has systemized narrative elements, the hero's journey, the moral compass, player agency, world building. Frankly, a lot of our English language, there's a sizable chunk of the English language that is based just solely on role-playing games. If you have at all spoken to someone about grinding or leveling up, NPCs, like these are all terms that came straight out of the D&D rule books.
Yeah, very true. And I don't have like strict evidence for this, but I theorize that the structure of an RPG source book and the way that it lays out information in a comprehensive way about a setting has shaped how a lot of people think about fiction, about development, about building out narrative worlds.
Inhabiting a character.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Big time. There's a 2024 essay by Literary Hub that argued that D&D's open-ended improvisational storytelling is a folk practice, which I love that. I just love that, for generating fiction, and that its influence on how a generation thinks about narrative is as significant as any Masters of Fine Arts program in the world.
Oh, absolutely. Like I talk about this all the time when I pitch tabletop games to people, but it's one of the only places that people can engage in a collaborative development of a story. It's pretty hard to find that experience. Like for a lot of people, it's their strongest creative outlet because they're telling a really well realized, often epic narrative in some cases, and many times many of these with a small band of people. Like it is one of the best things you can do with your friends because there are so many artistic exercises that can be part of that, whether that's uh, like literally play acting, whether it's writing material for the character, considering them, the art that goes into a campaign, sometimes cartography, right? All of these things can be part of it, and it turns into this gestalt whole that becomes a really well-developed fiction.
I love that you use terms like gestalt. It just like, oh, I love this. This is so cool. You should have seen my vocabulary test from junior high, because the teacher's like, how do you know how to spell Dweomer? How do you even know what Dweomer is?
Tabletop games.
I crushed the extra credit vocab tests.
Strong. We do have a few screenshots, by the way.
Yeah. Do you want to read this one or should I?
Go ahead, please.
Necroplayer. Thank you so much, Necroplayer. In all the media y'all have consumed. Oh, he may be from my neck of the woods because I also say y'all a lot. What are some of y'all's favorite fake D&D game names, positive or negative representation aside, from shows and or movies? Fake D&D? So product placement in a lot of movies, like Quentin Tarantino has Red Apple cigarettes, right? Like it's a fake brand.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I've ever. I guess Mazes and Monsters is the only one I'm familiar with.
My favorite is Dark Dungeons from the Jack Tracks.
That movie!
Awesome.
That movie is freaking rad. And by the way, if you like D&D and you like funny movies and you want to see a funny movie about D&D, go check out Dark Dungeons. It's by the Zombie Orpheus guys. It's by the guys who did the Gamers movies, and it's so good. Oh yeah, that movie has a permanent place in my collection.
Yeah, that was like part of the Satanic Panic, right? The original comic, because that was like the 80s.
I've reached eighth level. I now have the true power. No, Blackleaf, I don't want to die.
Oh God. It's so good. It's so good. Yeah, that and Mazes and Monsters were two of the landmarks that era, I think.
Volcano, hey, that is a really cool emblem there. Looks almost like a One Piece pirate flag, which is really cool. Volcano says tabletop can subvert the portion of memory that helps you remember stories. Instead, you remember them as if they happened directly to you.
Huh. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, actually. I mean, when you're playing a tabletop game, you're engaging in pretty serious decision making a lot of the time, right? You're assuming that role, you're thinking through the structure of what's going on, what you're risking, what you might achieve. And that gets encoded, right?
Yeah, I had not thought about that. Volcano, that's brilliant. Thanks for bringing that up. Appreciate that.
Welcome to Psych 102 with the Lorebeards.
Yeah, I know, right? Sorry, guys. Well, listen, there's a lot to touch on. I'm trying to cover like some of the bigger stuff before we zoom in. Did you want to say anything more about the literature and creative writing side?
Oh boy. Yeah, I've seen a lot of people who start world building like in that direction as well. Like I think that it's had a really strong impact on this because I see kids who want to write a story and they start by developing a setting. Like they envision the world through like a source book they can pour through. They want to flesh out all of these things. It's just interesting how it's colored that. And like, again, lit RPG is such a big deal. Like Sung Jin Woo solo leveling, it's like very much an RPG thing. It's like huge these days.
Love that series. Big fan.
Hunter x Hunter, which I talked about at length recently, had a whole Greed Island arc that was explicitly a role-playing game. Among my favorites.
Now I'm more interested in Hunter x Hunter. I gotta.
Oh, it's so good. I'm gonna just keep. It's so cool.
So I think. Well, did you have more? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
I could go on for an hour. It's a structured thing. It provides a framework to think about story, like you said. It's a useful device, right? Like a lot of isekai, like Tensei Shitara Slime, that kind of like the slime anime, Kumo Desuga Naniga with the spider. Like all of these isekai have these structures explicitly. Like a lot of them more mimic video games. We're going to talk about video games, I promise.
We are, for sure, because I was going to jump into visual art and illustration.
Yes, please.
And this touches on video games, obviously. And I would go so far as to say this. I think that Dungeons and Dragons became the lens through which the West, at least, and culturally through osmosis, places like Japan, how they came to view the fantasy genre. I think that Tolkien gave us like a map. Like this is kind of like the foundation, the keystone of what Western fantasy is. But D&D was the lens. D&D was, here's what it looks like. Like before Clyde Caldwell and Larry Elmore and Jeff Easley, did we know what a wizard looked like? Could you like, could you sketch one out? Those guys defined what wizards looks like, what dragons look like, what dungeons look like. They defined, they created a visual grammar of fantasy. And I just don't think you can underestimate that. In the UK, of course, you had John Blanche and Carl Critchlow. They developed a slightly different approach, which, of course, Blanche would go on to define the look of Warhammer 40K, which is a huge part of my life. But it's not just them. It's also how it cross-pollinated with the punk and the goth and the comic scenes. And there's a whole generation of artists and creators for comics, specifically from the 80s. Alan Moore, Grant Morrison, Neil Gaiman. I mean, shame about what happened to Neil Gaiman, but all three of these guys were tabletop enthusiasts, or at least they were influenced by it and have talked about it. And so these guys reshaped what comics were. And some of that, especially the fantasy comics or comics that dealt with fantasy, they got influenced by the art and the look and the feel. If you look at Planescape from the 90s or Vampire the Masquerade, there is entire genres of films and basically the look of all vampires post Hammer horror. It has something to do with Vampire the Masquerade, right? Like it redefined how we look at horror. So yeah. Oh, and album cover art. Rush points out. Rush 21 point. Yeah, several bands. Yeah, Lauren Guard, Avenged Sevenfold, and several others. I'm sure you guys probably can list a whole bunch of them, but they all have album covers. Album covers from the late 70s, early 80s were very Tolkien, very D&D, and this cross-pollinated everywhere.
Well, there's an entire genre now called like dungeon synth too, which is explicitly like songs to run a D&D campaign to, right?
Yeah. But I think Elmore and Clyde Caldwell and Jeff Easley do not get nearly enough credit for basically establishing the baseline of this is what fantasy looks like.
Yeah, and you can see like how D&D's effects on that imaginary, that development of the fantasy world to this day. Like I think that the two most common kinds of like OC art are Sonic the Hedgehog and RPG character. That's it.
Oh no, yeah, absolutely. You go on DeviantArt and you search for OC and you search for RPG, and it's almost like it's a Venn diagram with very little outside the bubble.
Millions of images, millions, literally.
What about cognitive science and neuroscience?
Ooh.
So cognitive researchers believe that tabletop role-playing games simultaneously exercise an unusual breadth of mental faculties. The game demands working memory, tracking your character stats, plot details, resource states. It requires strategic planning, probabilistic thinking, perspective taking, creative improvisation. Honestly, it's one of my favorite things about role-playing games is the creative improvisation, and narrative reasoning all at once in a social, not educational context. So you learn it even though you don't mean to learn it. And research suggests that regular engagement in these kinds of mentally stimulating activities can enhance memory and cognitive function into older age. The perspective taking dimension is particularly interesting to social psychologists because there is no better way to foster empathy than to play pretend, take on the role of a oppressed group or a stereo or a species like elves who get stereotyped, this is kind of the core cognitive act of D&D is the perspective taking, and it reduces negative stereotypes and builds empathy with measurable effects.
Yeah, like a lot of the time in psychology, there's a talk of taking on the other's shoes, like walking a mile in their shoes, imagining this position of the other. D&D sort of tricks you into doing that. The experience of playing a role-playing game necessitates this almost, right? Even if you're playing as yourself transported to some other place in time, you're in a different social role than you were in your native land, right? It's a pretty elegant thing.
HVW says some players have less working memory than others. That's true. Zera's waving her hand. She's like, that's me.
It is a thing though, like to avoid dementia, one of the like secret stratagems is to navigate new places a lot, to try and encompass the idea of a new space in 3D, to figure out how to get around somewhere, to keep in mind the spatial logistics. This is a really good neural exercise. Guess what game has a lot of maps?
Yeah. Now, for anybody who's curious, Vera is playing along great, but I did not tell her any of this stuff before we started the show. She knew the general topic, and that was it. So
I do my own prep, but I think about this stuff a lot, right? Like, it's interesting to me.
That's what I was getting at. Is like she's dialed in. She knows exactly what the hell she's talking about. Hey, we got Biofoot. Oh, he's a member. Hey, do you want to read this one?
Yeah, Biofoot, thank you so much for 4 months of membership. We'll teach all classes using tabletop RPGs and Fishman. The day is coming. Just you wait.
And lastly, in terms of like big sweeping stuff, I was going to mention computer science and AI because.
Oh yeah.
Good.
No, just the problem of how to make a living world, like in a tabletop game, come alive definitely pushes this kind of stuff, right? Like, I've seen some of the first deployment of like, I don't like how this was done. I'll put it like that. But I've seen like video games recently, like Where Winds Meet, they had a attempt, and not a good one, at using like language learning models to flesh out like the entire world and if like every character take on their own personality and be possible to talk to. It's a place where like this stuff is constantly challenged, like the decision making that needs to be made for characters to operate in combat, even in games like Baldur's Gate, right? It's pushing the boundaries of how computer reasoning happens and like nav meshing and so on.
Well, did you know that one of the foundational blocks of large learning models is about random generation, right? Like randomly creating things that it can then like assign to different signifiers.
Yeah, so like the super crash course none of these actually work is they get an input and they find like a sort of reasonable next step and they just keep doing that, filtering down through what kind of makes sense, and then they churn out an answer.
And that comes from a 1980 game called Rogue, which was random dungeon generation, directly borrowed from D&D. So love it or hate it, with AI, it's born from D&D, just like a whole bunch of stuff is in our world that we never knew.
Yeah, and of course the roguelike genre is now it's so pervasive. We have roguelikes, we have roguelites, we have roguish games, we have all of these things. Right? There's subgenres now.
So the entire field of procedural content generation leaps from like Athena from Zeus's brow. It comes from D&D. I honestly was shocked when I discovered this during my research. I was like, what? Really? Okay, wow. That's crazy. And every procedurally generated game world you've ever seen, like Minecraft, like No Man's Sky, comes from, well, eventually No Man's Sky, I should say, comes from this lineage. And there's another tabletop RPG concept that became a foundational unit of AI design, specifically for video games. Vera, what if I told you that the non-player character is that element?
Yeah, like I was saying, it is a constant challenge. Like, how do you make a NPC in a video game feel like a real person, right? Like, how do you do this? And you can either do a lot of back end writing and a lot of really specific conditional coding, or you can try and make them smart.
So the tabletop RPG concept of the non-player character, this is part of every behavior tree, every machine-driven learning chatbot, every modern video game AI system. And this all comes from tabletop RPG game master design theory. It is all part of how tabletop games define that challenge first. How do you simulate a character with an apparent agency, memory, and personality?
Yeah, like a lot of these chatbots and things now will have a core prompt like about their identity, like what they are, and those are pretty close to what you get as a brief for like taking on the role of a character in a tabletop game.
Yeah, you can zoom out a little further, and there's a term people like to apply called interactive narrative. And interactive narrative, if you were to like look at the bottom of the tree that is interactive narrative, you'd see two big things. One is D&D, and the other is Choose Your Own Adventure as a book series. But again, it's frightening and a little fascinating to learn just how much of our modern world like has roots in D&D.
I will note on this LLM NPC tangent, it is not quite there yet. I was annoyed by the fact they wanted me to role play with computers and where winds meet, and proceeded to prompt inject them by spamming keywords at them until they agreed to whatever I wanted.
Well, so, we're fortunately, I would argue, we are not yet at a point where a chatbot can run your D&D game. I would prefer not to have that happen, but you know, this is the world we're in.
Yeah, so. I think that'd be a loss in some ways because it's such a good social activity. Like, part of the beauty of it is you make a world with your friends. Like, I've made a lot of my closest friends through tabletop gaming. I think it's, again, one of the coolest things you can do with people, and it brings you together because you're making magic together, sometimes like kind of literally.
It's difficult for me to think of a single friend that wasn't connected to me somehow through role-playing games. So there's that. Speaking of in terms of language in general, though, this is where we talked about, like, you know, NPCs or leveling up, grinding, boss fights, loots, HP, roll for initiative, chaotic good, natural 20. These are all things that originate in RPG design and have migrated completely into mainstream speech. You can apply it to anything from pizza toppings to Supreme Court justices.
And even like certain words like critical or advantage become more like lodged in the brain. You want to apply these in certain ways. Your lexicon is funny like that. It's malleable. It pulls from things you hear a lot in other contexts, wants to deploy them somehow.
Yeah, and I mean, it gets wild. So the tabletop renaissance, the tabletop role-playing game stuff. It almost died in the 90s. It nearly died. Late 90s, you had TSR going bankrupt. You had WotC getting acquired by, well, WotC acquiring TSR and then getting acquired by Hasbro. The reset that was D&D 3rd edition. The hobby was undergoing some serious problems, but it didn't get in. It entered a staggering commercial revival, not just in games, but across everything. And this market grew enormously year over year through the 2010s, through the 2020s. And it was driven by things that we enjoy, or probably have enjoyed, at least in the last few years. Stranger Things, Critical Role, Baldur's Gate 3, just to name a few.
You wrote a fantastic article on Critical Role and what like live play has done for just the scene of role-playing games in general. I recommend this, but it's a great read.
Oh, that's over on Bell Lost Souls, I think.
Yeah.
I have written some articles for Bell Lost Souls if you want to go check them out. They're over there. And I do talk about how streaming revolutionized the whole ball game about 15 years ago. It was a big deal. So yeah, D&D is not just a game. It's a legitimate tool for therapeutic, educational use. It is, it's specifically good for autistic youth, kids with anxieties, social disorders, trauma survivors, because the fictional frame allows for emotional exploration at a safe distance.
Yeah, it's possible to put the brakes on the narrative, right? It's a exploration of possibly challenging moments, but with the opportunity to step away from it. It's empowering in that way. And I can tell you, this means a lot to some kids. They don't feel like they have agency. Suddenly they do.
Yeah, it's over 40 years. We went from this game will make kids kill themselves to this game is a licensed therapeutic tool.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about like D&D and psychology and mazes and monsters. It kind of saves his life, right?
Yeah. And again, this was a game that was declared dead, and the comeback narrative is big. But yeah, I mean, did you want to talk about any of those other things before I move on?
Oh boy, we'll circle back.
All right. So I was talking about Tolkien.
Mm-hmm.
D&D codified and systematized Tolkien. It turned that world that people love. So in case you were not aware, Tolkien was huge in the late 60s and 70s. I mean, it was one of those books that like literally everyone had read on college campuses was The Hobbit or Lord of the Rings or the whole thing. It was very fashionable to have read The Hobbit or read Lord of the Rings. And so that was a big cultural moment of those eras. So you get the late 70s when D&D rolls around, and it is it's not just like, okay, you like Tolkien, cool, here's more of that. It's defining it. It's turning it into mechanics. It's making it a new home in your brain that is just so much more real than it was when it was just a story, because you could take part in it. You could interact with it. And everything else that comes after Tolkien that's based in fantasy, Warcraft, the Elder Scrolls, Final Fantasy, even the Lord of the Rings films, draws on D&D's interpretation of Tolkien, as well as directly from Tolkien.
Yeah, because in terms of influences on RPGs, D&D sort of started out as a wargaming product, right? It was a build this way. It was marketed in these circles because people would do reenactment wargaming and things like Civil War style things, sometimes fantasy games, and it gained its own audience. It had like a really wildfire spread back when it was first launched, and the D&D enthusiast scene was very distinct from this more tactical squad-based kind of game.
If we don't have D&D, we don't have Games Workshop at all, because Games Workshop started as a distribution company for Dungeons & Dragons in the UK. And this is where we get the Fiend Folio from, was all the monsters that were published in the White Dwarfs back in the day. This is, Greg Stafford, Gary Gygax, Dave Arneson. These are big names of early game designers that obviously Arneson and Gygax were actually building Dungeons & Dragons. Stafford, of course, built on it to create RuneQuest and Chlorantha. But that RuneQuest and Glorantha are big building blocks for HeroQuest and the Elder Scrolls. In case you like Skyrim, that's Greg Stafford's his DNA is in it, and underneath that is Dungeons and Dragons. Do you like Cyberpunk? I like Cyberpunk. Cyberpunk is cool as hell. Without D&D, we wouldn't have Cyberpunk.
Not just the franchise, the genre. Like,
yeah, for real.
It would not have evolved from just Neuromancer, I don't think. It took like a lot to get there.
Well, Mike Pondsmith famously published Cyberpunk 2020 back in the 1980s, 40 years ago. And decades later, we get Cyberpunk 2077, which is one of the best video games I've ever played in my entire life. I love it so much. You've got Ed Greenwood, who wrote The Forgotten Realms, sold it for the price of a tabletop computer, a desktop computer, like $4,500. Which is, unfortunately like super cheap, but he is the creator. Like that guy is the creator of one of the most expansive fictional universes ever created by man. The Forgotten Realms is huge. I mean, it's explored through video games, it's explored through audio dramas, it's explored through novels, it's explored through the games. Like it's been in every edition of D&D except for like the very first edition. So yeah, those are just some examples of how D&D helps people create or become architects of franchises that we know well today. And go ahead.
Yeah, like in 2009, for context, tiny child Vera was exposed to something called the Unforgotten Realms by the Escapist podcast, which I think was my first like direct contact, like D&D mythos things. And I loved this and had no idea what the heck it was referencing, but that was an early point of contact for me. I think of things like a dual-wielding shields that I have since seen show up actually in various tabletop games and even Dark Souls, right?
Yep. Now let me drop some big stuff on you.
All right, let's go.
Star Wars what we know about Star Wars outside of the first 3 films is almost 100% based on the West End Games D6 Star Wars role-playing game. Because that's what happened in between the first 3 movies and anything else. Like all we had was like those Ewok adventure movies for Star Wars. And it is difficult for me to explain just how significant this is, because prior to the West End Games Star Wars role-playing game, we didn't know what Twi'leks were called or where they were from. We didn't know what Aqualish were called. We didn't know about the Imperial Security Bureau, which is such a big part of Andor, one of the greatest Star Wars shows ever made, and various other things. And Disney, when they purchased Lucasfilm, they kept like 90% of the role-playing game material for their own stuff. Fun fact, the Mandalorians are not from the role-playing game. Vera, do you want to take a guess where the Mandalorians first appeared?
Perhaps the comics.
Right. You are correct. Which comics, though?
Ooh, you're testing my familiarity here.
I will accept the publisher if you just want to say this publisher.
Dark Horse?
No, they are from the Marvel Star Wars series.
Okay.
1980. The Marvel comics, that's the Mandalorian's first appearance. And they were, of course, expanded by Karen Traviss and her novels and various other things. But if you like the Mandalorian and you're excited about the Mandalorian and Grogu, that's actually from the comics, the Marvel comics, which I was startled to find that out today during my research. Pretty excited. Really? Yeah, it's really fun. So RPG writers are typically, or often, I should say, not typically, often they are the first people who are paid to think deeply about a franchise's world. And we have seen this over and over again. I can say with authority that a lot of the stuff we built into the Warhammer 40K role-playing games has entered the mainstream of Warhammer 40K as a setting. That's true for fantasy as well, Warhammer Fantasy. Did you know that what we know about Star Trek Klingons largely comes from the FASA Star Trek game?
Yeah, because when you want to step into the role of that culture, you need to know a lot about it, right? I mean, it's not only an opportunity, it's a necessity.
So no D&D, we have a very different Star Wars. We have a very different Star Trek. We have it may not even have had it all Warhammer in any way. I think that's just crazy. And then of course you go to things like Warcraft, which is an orphaned Warhammer fantasy video game that of course became its own setting, became one of the most valuable gaming franchises in history. Well, we already talked about Record of Lotus War, the Dragonlance novels, for men of a certain age, or people of a certain age, I should say. The Dragonlance novels were huge because they were the first big mainstream novels. Like Quad Keep existed, but very few people knew about it. Dragonlance was front and center. Dragonlance was everywhere. If you played D&D at all, people were talking about Dragonlance. And it was huge. It was one of the most successful fantasy novel series of the 80s and 90s. And then, of course, we talked about the Forgotten Realms. And then, we get to the streaming era. Vera, do you want to talk about this part?
Well, of course, like Critical Role blew open the market for D&D. It became so popularized, it spread like wildfire. It turns out that having skilled voice actors in a campaign run by a talented DM where they're all having fun is a really great recipe for some impressive stuff. Our very own Andy Watt did a lot of cartography for Critical Role for some of the seasons. And it's just a great production. You've heard of it. You know about Critical Role, right? But of course, there have been tons of other streamed campaigns. Like it's become its own genre of thing, and it's really made the revival of tabletop role-playing games happen, because seeing the fun of the game in action is very different from the so-called theoretical fun locked away within these 3 hardcover books, right? It becomes far more tangible to see things in action. Like, it's not like the opening of E.T., right? It's not like the game in Stranger Things. It's a real campaign that you can follow along with. You can like chase the narrative of this. Of course, Critical Role has been adapted into animated shows and so on.
I wish I could go back in time and tell my 12-year-old self that some guy's D&D campaign will someday be a 3-season animated series on one of the biggest platforms in the world. I'd be like, what? And it's great. But then there's Dimension 20, and there's dozens of other actual play shows, including Andy Law's own Lawhammer. And what these have done is they've turned tabletop sessions into a full spectator entertainment genre. It's more like theater than gaming. And the most interesting angle about this for me is that this is the first time in history that I'm aware of that watching someone play a game with no video output, right? I mean, we're not even seeing like the chessboard where Kasparov is playing, right? No video output is a mainstream entertainment format. It says something deep about the storytelling power of this medium.
There's a reason they didn't go back to radio baseball broadcasts, right?
I mean, right? Yeah, a good example. Like, although my friend Charlie would hate this because he's a big audio drama guy. I'm like, audio dramas are kind of, they're the radio show is unfortunately come and gone as a mainstream thing. It still exists, and that's cool. I'm glad it exists, but it's people want to see something, and I thank God for Critical Role. These guys are all like very attractive people, generally speaking, so it didn't hurt. Didn't hurt. Like, you don't want me like to be the face of D&D. I promise you that.
Come on, the Ross Watson.
All right, so how do you feel, Vera, that D&D has influenced things like the writer's room for film and television?
Oh, boy. So there are a handful of writer's rooms that do their own tabletop gaming, like not just in film and TV, but also in like video games. Like if you go to Owlcat, they like play in-house campaigns and things, right? I think that the process of like role playing being normalized has changed how people flesh out scenarios. It's become a lot more tangible, a lot more active. People want to have a quick back and forth. Improv has become more of a part of how things are developed these days, right? Because it's more normalized. It's a hobby that all of your favorite writers participate in. I'll put it like that. Like, Everybody who's like a English majory creature is intrigued by D&D in some form or another. I promise.
Yeah, and so improv, of course, has its own. Improv is its own discipline, right? Improv theater.
Yes.
But I would argue, and I think if you were a scholar of improv theater, you would probably agree that the tabletop RPG systematized and popularized a lot of the improv theater rules. Yes, and for example, consequence-driven story, shared world building.
Want to give it the structure it needs for an extended narrative, because improv scenes are generally about like 2 to 5 minutes long otherwise, because how else can they exist? But things like the White Wolf LARPs have given people the tools to carry on with these shared settings of improv for like many decades.
Okay, I want to dive into the World of Darkness in just a second, but I want to go back really quick to the writer's room.
Mm-hmm.
So the MCU has been around for over 20 years. Well, almost 20 years. 2008 was the Iron Man. So we're 18 years in. 18 years, so almost 20 years of the MCU. Well, Jon Favreau is the guy who started it. He was the director of the first Iron Man movie. And Favreau credits D&D with teaching him story structure. So just to drop one thing on you, the last 18 years of superhero films, D&D, everybody. It's built on D&D. Of course,
there's so much influence, like the idea of like player agency being an important thing in video games, like Mass Effect, everything in D&D, of course.
Oh Lord, Mass Effect, yeah, God.
Shows like Adventure Time, yeah, like things that are explicitly based in that kind of environment where they play on these categorized regions, and it's something that wouldn't exist without D&D. A lot of these things.
I mean, I would love to spend 5 minutes just talking about the flip from the Satanic Panic to being name dropped in presidential campaigns. Because, Anderson Cooper talks about this, for example, about how the Satanic Panic and Dungeons & Dragons guided him towards journalism. It's a fascinating cultural story. If you're curious, if you want to know more about the Satanic Panic, go there. There's some great articles out there about it. There's a book called The Elusive Shift, and any of the histories of Dungeons and Dragons. I think the Game Wizards would be another good one to look at. But then we get to the 90s. We got to fast forward because we've name dropped White Wolf a bunch. Vampire the Masquerade. It deserves its own segment because it was such a big thing. It dropped like a massive mausoleum tomb right in the middle of the role-playing game industry, and just like the ripples are still being felt.
Well, yeah, because it pulled role-playing games out of the pizza basement and put them into the goth club. People would suddenly do scenes in like all sorts of scenarios, right? It changed the dynamic a lot for these things. It made them sexy.
There are scholars who say that Vampire the Masquerade helped build the goth scene.
Oh, absolutely. There's a reason that like vampy looks are so popular, right? Like it's so connected.
And the framing of the Masquerade, the aesthetic of an urban predator, and with all these politics and things around it, that is where we get Blade. Okay, still a Marvel movie, still a character from the 60s, but look at that movie. Okay, just watch Blade. Watch any of the Blade movies. Underworld, the Twilight series, True Blood, essentially all modern vampires as lifestyle media owes a debt to White Wolf and Vampire the Masquerade. Would you agree, Vera?
Oh yeah, and like you want to talk about psychology, the goth subculture sort of has its origins in separation from the norm. Like you're a small little group in your town, you have your own kind of style, and suddenly you have this collaborative role-playing game where not only are you the most powerful person anybody around knows, but it's given you like a fashion magazine to look book from.
Yes.
Like you could assume that role like day to day, and people did. They would dress like this. They figured out the little hints of their blood red and black fashions and would incorporate that into their personal style and their identity at large. And I know a lot of people who have really adopted some elements of these white wolf experiences into their personas as people.
I mean, you could argue that Vera, your persona is a little bit goth.
I prefer alternative.
Fair enough. Goth influence at the very least, but
yeah, for sure.
The World of Darkness. This is a reshaping of horror culture, of goth culture. It is the most clearest example I can give of a tabletop RPG actively generating a pop culture aesthetic, not just influencing an existing one, but creating it. Now, I mean, you co-create. I would argue it's not the sole source, but it's a very significant source of that aesthetic.
Yeah, I think like Vampire the Masquerade and The Matrix.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, well, The Matrix is based on anime, which, as we already know, is based on a lot of D&D stuff. So there's that. Oh my God, we can talk about this forever.
Yeah, like Dot Hack, hugely influential, kind of the predecessor to a lot of these isekai trapped in the game things. Like it's sort of anticipated, let's say, Sword Art Online and so on, right?
Dot Hack walked so Sword Art Online could run.
Yep.
I'll be honest, I was a little bored with Dot Hack. The central concept was really cool, but then the pacing was like, you're killing me.
The designs though are unbeatable. It's so good.
Some of the music is just still, I have like some of that music on my playlist. But Sword Art Online is a way more accessible, I think, in my opinion, story. Yeah. So if you guys are all familiar with stuff you would see on a mobile game or a video game, the XP bar, the achievement system, the skill tree, the daily quest, level up notifications. These are all direct RPG mechanics that were translated wholesale into mobile apps, fitness trackers, loyalty programs, corporate training platforms, and social media engagement systems. Functionally, tabletop RPG progression systems without the dice is where we get a lot of this. And the technical term for this is gamification. But that DNA of that game, the gamification of it is inextricably linked with tabletop RPGs.
Yeah, like on twitch.tv, which I use and which Ross uses. Whoa, you can investigate these places. There are like rewards for daily check-ins, like milestones. You can subscribe to a channel for a long time, your badge upgrades. There's things like this, right?
A Duolingo, LinkedIn skill endorsements, Fitbit streaks. These are all RPG mechanics. Even frequent flyer tiers are. No, I'm serious. Do you laugh? I'm serious. There's people that have like done like serious scholarly studies on this topic. So there was a rich field for me to gather my research from.
Today I'll be role playing as someone who always sleeps through the fight.
Now, we've name dropped a few people on the show so far. We've name dropped some authors, some directors. The list of celebrities who are into D&D and have been influenced by D&D is very long, very, very long. Joseph Gordon-Levitt, Matthew Lillard, Joe Manganiello, Dame Judi Dench, Carl Urban, Vin Diesel, Robin Williams, Deborah Ann Woll. By the way, Deborah Ann Woll has like one of the best like examples of how to teach someone what D&D is like. She teaches John Bernthal about D&D and choices in like 30 seconds. It's amazing. It's well worth your time to look it up on YouTube. Mike Myers, Sean Astin, Fairuza Balk, Bruce Campbell, Ben Affleck, Ewan McGregor, Jason Statham, Shia LaBeouf, James Franco, Wayne Brady. Just the tip of the iceberg of people who are confirmed D&D players in Hollywood.
Well, of course, Vin Diesel adopted his D&D character for The Last Witch Hunter, the movie, which is getting a sequel. We're getting a sequel to The Last Witch Hunter at long last. I know you've been waiting for 10 years.
Not
It's
exactly.
happening.
Stay calm. It's happening.
We love it.
Let's talk about Dan Harmon, creator
Harmontown, yeah, mentioned earlier.
Community, creator of Rick and Morty, Felicia Day, Will Wheaton, Patton Oswalt, as Anderson Cooper, as I mentioned before, of course, Stephen Colbert, Dave Chappelle, Marilyn Manson, Jack Black, the entire band of Iron Maiden, Joss Whedon, Ta-Nehisi Coates, and Stephen King are all former D&D players and have listed D&D as a influence on them, on their creativity. Tim Duncan, Chris Jericho, The Big Show, Paul Wright, in terms of athletes. And there's even guys that have, there's an official WWE D&D actual play. If you didn't know that, I didn't know that until I did this research.
I didn't know that. Wait a minute.
Yeah, holy shit, right? Xavier Woods and Austin Watson are the guys you want to look at. Wow. So again, that is not even the complete list. That's just the short list. Billy Crystal played Warhammer 40K at the very least. And he played it with Robin Williams. So probably, there's a Venn diagram crossover there. So yeah, these are, we should talk about Game of Thrones.
Oh, yeah.
Vera, is Game of Thrones based on D&D?
Game of Thrones is based on the mind of a D&D player.
Well, there is a campaign setting from TSR that came out in 1995. It's called Birthright. And in Birthright, it centers on noble houses, bloodline-based powers, domain-level political play, realm management, and the idea that the player protagonist's identity is inseparable from dynastic inheritance. Birthright introduced domain-level mechanics, diplomacy, warfare, trade, taxation, bloodline regency that was like the resource you spent to make things happen as core gameplay. And it featured a empire that was fractured into several smaller nations, squabbling over a seat of power that was called the Iron Throne. One of the designers of Birthright is a personal friend of mine, named Ed Stark. Now, I'm not saying that Birthright gave rise to Game of Thrones. What I am saying is it sure as hell looks like it. To a casual observer, it's like, yeah, and knowing that George Martin is a gamer, like for sure, like that's like Well,
even structurally, Game of Thrones embraces a really wide range of character POVs, right? And which is in fact why it's taken so long for George R.R. Martin to write any new entries, because suddenly he has like 17 different POVs to consider how to balance and thread through. It's sort of like the nightmare where every character has split from the party that was already too large. But that kind of structure, that kind of narrative beat is present in places like Herodotus and Dungeons and Dragons. Like those are the two locales. Like LOGH does this kind. It's like one of the classics, but much in the same way, it's just so divided. I think that, like,
go ahead. No, please.
Just that narrative structure screams like role-playing to me, because each character has their own motivations, their own perspective that is considered essential to the story. They're all like threaded in some way, and it's complicated. There's a reason that he took a break to write some Hedge Knight stuff. It's a little more condensed.
So yeah, I have gone through, I think, the majority of the things that I wanted to talk about. So would you like to lead us down a different path, Vera, about the influence of role-playing games?
Oh boy.
We could talk more anime, or we could talk more video games. We could talk more film and television, novels.
Like, there are so many individual points where you can see the structures of role-playing games employed, right? Like, the whole lit RPG genre, a lot of isekai, they rely on familiarity in some ways with the trappings of leveling up, the trappings of amassing more power, like things like Dungeon Meshi play on the way that the Japanese imaginary has captured early editions of Dungeons and Dragons, which was essential to like shaping a lot of Western-styled fantasy. Things like Toriyama very much pulled from some of these things.
For Dragon Ball Z.
Well, for Dragon Quest
and Dragon Ball Z, yes,
yeah.
All Toriyama. I mention it because I didn't know if our listeners may not know Toriyama was the designer of both, so that's the only reason I read it.
I think that it's created its own language, right? Like we have at this point an entire design language that springs from like +2 weapons. The idea of an enchanted weapon, that might not have sounded like a good thing at one time. Like, what do you mean it's enchanted? This has become synonymous with like some kind of bonus, right? And it's sort of created a new design language. It's like a cheat code. There are a lot of light novels and things that rely on the idea of leveling up or progression. Like these tiered systems have made their way into all sorts of settings and environments. Like you read anything on Royal Road, and there's going to be some kind of numbered system, right? This all stems directly from role-playing games, right?
Yeah, Dungeon Crawler Carl, which is like the most popular lit RPG at the moment, I think, has done that. Harry Potter is very stratified, and a lot of the spells and abilities and magic items from that. You could talk Fallout in general. Fallout in general is based on, the special stats. Those were originally GURPS stats that they just were like, well, we're not going to use GURPS. It's too much trouble to license it. We'll change the names a little bit.
Yeah, because it turns out that these settings, these systems that work well for developing a narrative people can play out in real time, apply really nicely to a polished video game experience and slot in quite well to a narrative where someone is gaining power within them. Like, if you can tell a story of a D&D campaign about Drizzt and it's interesting, then you can pretty successfully write a lot of things with similar structures, right?
Here's an interesting comment. HVW says Japanese fantasy is interesting because they hold on to pig-like orcs, which are kind of an artifact of early D&D that D&D moved away from. Yeah, Japanese fantasy has charted its own course, and you can see a lot of the basic DNA still there. It's just been remixed in, I would argue, in many more interesting ways than any of the tabletop groups have achieved.
Yeah, same for dog-like kobolds, which were sort of a holdover from like first edition, I believe, like the earliest monster manual. They were sort of a dog lizard thing, and we've seen both directions diverge from this, right? Because the kobolds are very much like dragon affiliated here in the West. They become minions of great powered beasts in the East. They're sort of like dog-like creatures that hunt in packs, etc. So
yeah, and of course, modern television is just chock full of references to D&D. I myself have seen episodes of She-Ra and the Princesses of Power that have a D&D episode. Ted recently had a D&D episode. Ghosts, Community, Freaks and Geeks, Big Bang Theory, Stranger Things, of course, Futurama. Futurama had a whole film about it, which is pretty great. Always Sunny in Philadelphia, Parks and Recreation, Warehouse 13, The IT Crowd, South Park, The Simpsons, American Dad, Gravity Falls. The list goes on and on. And that's not counting. I mean, we're not even touching films. Oh, Mickey Stopwatch.
Mickey's notes wizardry here, which I think is important to touch on because it did in fact create a lot of the structural trappings of like how video games would envision this sort of system, where they plop down the enemy, there's your party panel, there's adventuring guilds and so on, which have become like an enormous trope. But the sort of memers, what happens at the table, like, here's the miniature, it's an ogre, then like amass your guys, start rolling dice.
Yeah, so Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest, and Wizardry, Zelda, to an extent. I unironically love the idea of an adventurer's guild and how adventurers are ranked, which is a big part of Japanese fantasy. And I wish we had more of that. I would love to bring that more into. I would love to put that more up front in D&D because it's such a great idea. It's such a really cool. There's so many stories you could tell based on like, well, what's my ranking at the guild, and how does the guild assign quests? Do I have to be a certain rank to achieve this quest? I mean, there's so many. I mean, there's a great subplot in Overlord all about the Adventurers Guild and like what they do and what they should be doing. It's fascinating. It's something the Japanese came up with that the West somehow never did, and it boggles my mind.
Well, it provides such an easy structure, right? Like, I think the reason all this stuff is caught on so strongly is because it gives it a direct and obvious sense of progression. It makes it tangible. It creates anticipation because you can see what's ahead. There's a lot of benefits to this narratively, right? It's a thing you can gate mechanics behind in a video game, for example. Like, I think like every role-playing game almost has some kind of progression mechanic where you get stronger over time, and anticipating that is part of the fun, like planning out what your build might look like. God knows I played Pathfinder, and I had documents that stretched on for pages and pages of theory crafting about how my feats could interact and what's necessary to unlock certain things and what would be efficient use of level up bonuses. So
this is actually the core tenet of what makes Solo Leveling such a great anime. In Solo Leveling, there's only one guy who knows it's a game. There's only one guy who can level up because he has access to the interface. That means it is a game. To everyone else, it's not. But to him, he can actually level up and improve and grow and like access things that, you know, are typical for characters in a Final Fantasy game, like your inventory and potions and stuff like that, that everyone else in the world can't. And it's fascinating to see how that changes the whole structure of what that story is about and what it's like and the conflict that arises from it.
Yeah, I don't think we've said this phrase today yet, but power fantasy.
Yes.
Yeah, like power fantasy is something that can be activated in a lot of ways, but with the new language of like experience and leveling up and progression, it becomes very tangible, right? Like, and in settings with ranking systems and so on, you can display this. You can show off somebody from 1 or 2 ranks above the protagonist, and then wow, they're doing cool stuff. They played on this in the recent D&D movie. They have this paladin fellow show up who is leaps and bounds ahead of the rest of the party.
Renee Jean Page, yeah. God, what's his name? Xander Zart, starts with an X.
It's been a little while.
Yeah, I love that movie though. Big fan.
It's fantastic. But it's very aware of these things. Like the writers' room there had to be great fun because they were pulling not only from like the manuals and things, but also the culture of gaming. Like there were a lot of nods to what it's like to be at the table, right? One of the greatest scenes in that is when they're speaking with dead, and it gets more and more
Zenk.
sort of blasé.
His character's name was Zenk. It starts with an X.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah. So yeah, there's a little known period of online games that I was a big part of in the 90s, which was called MUDs or Muxes or Moos. They were a fully text-based predecessor to MMOs.
Oh yeah.
Some of these were very MMO. When you're talking about a MUD, that stands for multi-user dungeon. And this is, you know, you type in, you know, walk north, and the game would describe the room to you and describe what was in the room. And you could take actions by saying, you know, I attack the orc, or I pick up the pie, or whatever. It was kind of like Zork, but multiplayer. If anybody remembers Zork, and these things got pretty in depth, and they became what we now know as MMOs. The Muxes or Mushes, which stands for multi-user experience or multi-user shared hallucination in the case of Mush, these were far more narrative. They did have like the capability to roll dice, and you know, shockingly, Vera, since this was in the 90s, what can you imagine was the most popular Mushes?
Could they have been superhero things?
No, World of Darkness. World of Darkness ruled the roost.
Oh yeah, okay. Just straight up pulling
Big
from White
time.
Wolf.
Big time. Everybody wanted to play it, and with a mush, you could play it from anywhere, anytime, and there was almost always somebody online to play with. Honestly, I kind of miss those days because I don't know if there's a good replacement for that at all, unfortunately, because it was so reliant on the ability to describe text as opposed to visuals.
So here's a question: how well connected were these? How let's say persistent were the narratives here?
Oh, they were pretty persistent. Like how do I put this? So you'd make it so in a mush environment, like I played on Two Moons, which was the ElfQuest mush.
Okay.
And I played a lot of Shadowrun mushes, and I played several World of Darkness mushes. College for me was more about like getting into the computer room than getting into the classroom. My lack of a degree speaks very highly to how addictive these things were. Anyway, in a mush environments, you'd make a character, and this is actually honestly where I learned how to type really well and write really well, write descriptions very well, because you had to get people's attention. Like, you know, if you walked into the bar and you didn't have like a cool paragraph, at least like a tight little 3-sentence about what was going on when you walked into the bar, nobody paid any attention to you. So you had to type quickly, you had to type well, and you had to write, you know, evocatively. But the persistent aspect of it was your character was always there. You would log off, sure, you know, but when you log back on, all the businesses that you were involved in or missions that you missed while you were gone, those took place. Those happened. There was a world that grew and changed. It wasn't perfect. The only way to do combat was to drop a thing called the time stop, which meant that if you started a combat, the rest of the world would be going at normal speed, and everybody around you was like at the DMV, like a sloth in Zootopia, you know. And the game mastering and the mushes was it was a thing. You know, this is also the early days of cyber sex as a thing. So yeah, a lot of those games,
Huh?
a lot of those games would devolve into you know, the exploration of cyber sex and sexting and things like that. But anyway, what I'm getting at is that these were persistent worlds, and you did acquire money and places to live and gear and things like all that, which is Shadowrun, of course, very important to have like a cool pad and some cool gear. Anyway, they were a amazing artifact of that time period, the 90s to the mid 2000s. This is where this all lived.
So it's quite interesting hearing you describe this, because this does seem like a kind of play-by-post thing that is close to my own childhood and like college experience, where I did a lot of forum role playing, because I in middle and high school was on the Barton Town forums of Gaia Online doing play-by-post role play scenarios with their own threads and structured offshoots and like AOL Instant Messenger and so on Skype. And I was doing this as like a little kid, and I was role playing with like college students when I was in middle school and stuff. And then I continued doing this until hopefully soon, because I've got a friend who I've been begging to complete a private forum for this kind of thing for some time now. And I think that lineage carried on into a less live format, because it's still like of essence to write well and write quickly and get back to people in a timely manner. But these were not quite live, right? They were posted with a certain order and kept in oftentimes organized threads and subthreads that would, you guessed it, play into video gamey RPG progression, wherein there were rewards for posting a certain amount of times or completing quests, and your characters would have narrative abilities that you could unlock throughout progression and get your fantasy to progress and gain power in your fantasy and make it a power fantasy. And oh my god, and yeah, people would also like ERP. So
you know, ERP was it was a big thing. I don't know how else to explain it. And I was only 15 in 1990, so yeah, let's just say my hormones kept me engaged with that side of things for a while. I would say the important what I'm trying to get at, though, these are not like, I'm not trying to tell, like, this is not grandpa sitting in front of the fireplace trying to tell you about the good old days. Okay, I promise. These were the first virtual worlds. These were the first persistent online environments. These were the building blocks of what would become virtual reality itself. And it was based on D&D. It was based on Vampire the Masquerade. It was based on Shadowrun. And so to get back to what Vera was saying about the play by post, that is it in the parlance of those games. That is what's called asymmetrical role play, where you don't have to wait around for the other person to respond. You come back and, you know, whenever they respond is whenever you respond. Okay. But in the context of Muds, Mushes, Moos, Muxes, they had lots of different names. But in the context of a Mush era role-playing game, these were live. These were, you would actually get like, you get credit for being able to type a response in a reasonable time frame, like around 5 minutes. And if somebody was waiting more than 5 minutes for you to type something, they would probably go somewhere else. So again, it emphasized quicker responses. But even so, like, I remember writing like a typical post for me about like what I was doing might be 3 paragraphs long. It might be 5 paragraphs long. It might be 1 paragraph. It just depends on like the context and what we were doing. But I learned how to put a lot of description into a little space quickly. And that actually, like, all the role-playing games that I worked on benefited from the training that was those online games.
Yeah, likewise. Like I owe a lot of my development as a writer to churning out these passages of descriptive text and narration for my own forum roleplay exercises. So
yeah, we have a great comment here. Godzilla Rex says play by post lives on. It does. The last time I did play by post was 2009. So long time ago. For me, it's 17 years. And yes, Discord is where most of these. Discord is now where I do my asymmetrical role play is on Discord. Yes. Although that may be changing given how Discord is doing like some shady stuff with their service. So for now.
Like every new technological development since D&D has given us a new way to role play, right? Like games like Second Life are covered in this sort of like live action role playing things. Like people still play this. I remember discovering lots of nodes for this back in the day. Minecraft. I'm in right now a D&D themed survival multiplayer server that is structured like in an ongoing LARP where people like walk up and have scenes and go on adventures that have, of course, RPG mechanics because it has incorporated D20 systems somehow. And I think that like tabletop RPG has kind of just taught people it was possible to do this, to take on these roles and track them and earn things within them. And people have been capturing that in every area they can ever since.
Yeah, so there's a term for the study of games. It's ludology. And I have actually talked about ludology overseas. I've been to Finland to do discussions on how to create games and things like that. And what's fascinating to me, it's always been fascinating to me, is that ludology, the study of making games, is not just math. It's not just statistics. It is actually a very discipline. It's a pan-discipline field of study, because to know how to make a good game, you have to know what makes things fun. To know how to make things fun, you have to know a little bit about human nature, which means sociology, which means history, which means psychology. To know how mechanics affect players' behavior, you do need to know how math works and how science works. And sometimes even things like chemistry or biology come into the play here, because you're talking about things like LARPs, for example. Oh, by the way, Vera, I have a good friend of mine who wants to come talk to us about the Nordic LARP scene.
Oh, sounds great. Yeah, I have seen a couple of European LARPs I was fascinated by. There was one that was a Disco Elysium theme that I lamented not being able to go to.
Watch out, says Aramob. He's getting lewd. Ludology, yes.
We are talking Second Life.
Well, I mean, when you talk about virtual worlds, I think you cannot you can't just say yes, there was a bunch of cyber sex and move on sometimes, because it's ERP has been there as long as there's been virtual worlds. As long as there's been role playing, there's been ERP. So,
well, yeah, like if we're getting real, I think that D&D and the prominence of role-playing games has done a lot for like kink culture. Because people definitely do some self-exploration through that lens. They're playing a game with their significant other, and they go home, and no.
Yep. Without getting demonetized, I will simply say I believe that is true.
We're not going to branch into that, but games like World of Darkness, even, like, absolutely, there's like a lot of theming there. Like, it's everything but, like, very specifically, vampires cannot like engage in coitus, but deliberately a lot of things to do with like the kiss and draining blood are fetishized, right? Like sort of the aesthetic of the
blood
thing,
bond,
so.
the blood bond itself, and not for nothing, I went to several vampire LARPs, and I can tell you a hell of a lot of hooking up goes on at a vampire LARP.
Yeah,
hell of a lot.
It's the vibe.
It's well. So, I mean, it's this. We said we were going to touch on this. Before World of Darkness, it was a sausage party. Like finding a woman who was a gamer or a DM, especially a DM, was extremely rare. But when World of Darkness came along, when Vampire the Masquerade got really big and LARPing got really big, suddenly women were everywhere. They were taking part in the hobby in droves. And it was wonderful. It was honestly like a brand new dawn for me, because again, I was 15 years old. I was like, oh, this is great, awesome. Yeah, bring in more women, please, more girls. Love to see it. And but I came of age in '93. I was in the Army even by '95, and in between those 2 years, I was like, hell yeah! Like gaming has never been more fun because there's plenty of women around. One of my friends, he made a terrible joke, and I want to be clear, this is a terrible joke, but it's a little bit true and it's a little bit funny. So I'm going to say it out loud. This is not necessarily reflect my feelings, but this is my friend's joke. And he said the best thing about vampire LARPs is that it is a place to go to find women with low self-esteem. And I was
wow.
I was like, oof, but also, yeah, but also, like, I kind of hate that that's a funny joke.
I would go so far as to say it's not just the women. Okay.
No, God, no. Well, God, I mean, I think that's given if you're talking about role players. Just that there's a lot of self-esteem issues in the role in men in role playing. Absolutely, 100%. But
I've seen in a lot of cases that like the escape of a role-playing game turns into a healthy hobby for somebody who gains confidence in themselves as part of that process of like finding things that they're good at and finding friends, and then they continue to do the thing because it's fun long after, right?
Yeah, and this was the time when it just revolutionized gaming. LARPing had not really been a thing before. I mean, it existed. Let me be really clear. It existed, but it was not something you would find outside of, like, say, the SCA. And when White Wolf came along and made this awesome game that not only created the goth culture or helped create the goth culture, it brought in tons of women into what had previously been a men-only situation. It opened up this idea that you could play this game in real life. You could dress up and go to events and pretend to be vampires. I mean, it didn't hurt that you were, that the part of being a vampire was like getting, very close to a woman's neck, shall we say. Again, I was a young man. I wanted to be a part of this. And yeah, it was revolutionary. It was a big step forward, and it opened up avenues of role playing that had just never been seen before. And I think the majority of the women that took part in Vampire and enjoyed Vampire and got into it, they got into it not just because of the opportunities for romance. I'm pretty sure that was not the main thing on their mind. I think the main thing on their mind was dressing up and looking cool, like cosplay. A lot of cosplay comes from the Vampire LARP era.
Well, yeah, like the fashion element of it is just so cool. Like they give you a lookbook again, like, and it's so neat. Like it's pro-social. You get to like meet people, and you're wearing not your Sunday best, your Friday night best, and you're sharing a cool experience with people,
Well,
right?
I mean, it was everything from a 3-piece suit to a Victorian dress to goth looks, or even gang culture signifiers for gangrels, things like that, brouhaha. So yeah, it was pretty wild. Hey, we've got a super chat. Do you want to read this one out?
Hey, Skylar Martin, thank you so much. I'm reminded of What We Do in the Shadows. We Need a Virgin. Cut to the vampire henchman with people in a forest explaining, so LARP stands for live action roleplay.
Oh yeah, I forgot about this one. Yeah.
What We Do in the Shadows is amazing, by the way.
Oh, absolutely. Great find there, Skylar Martin. Appreciate you bringing that one up. Yeah, it's collaborative. It's the collaborative DNA of role-playing games extended into the real world in a way that we'd never seen before. And like I said, it was just it changed the gender what am I looking for? Disproportionality, I guess. There's probably a better word for it. Anyway, it changed the gender makeup of the hobby. It changed some of the age makeup of the hobby. Like we were getting, more younger people interested. And to this day remains a very strong entry and gate into the hobby, the industry, the enjoyment of role-playing games.
Yeah, like I think what's so cool about Vampire the Masquerade as a LARP, as like a shift for the culture, is that it took D&D, like I said, out of like the basement where you're in your pajamas eating pizza, out to a club. Suddenly, you and like 6 or 7 friends are wearing outfits that have to be 2 things: dark and powerful. And you are sharing a secret at this table in this cool location. You are doing right by the club. They're happy to have you. You're there with your drinks, like sharing some mood, laughing about stuff, like casting gazes in the unworthy around you. It's a cognitive shift. Suddenly you're set apart from the crowd and you're kind of looking cool doing it, right? Like it's a different energy.
It absolutely, she's talking some real truth here. She's laying out some real facts, because playing in your mom's basement was fun and cool when you were, 12, 13, 14. When you get to be 15,
still cool, damn it.
When you get to be 15 and 16 and older, and you're getting into college, you don't want to go to the basement. You want to go where the girls are. You want to go and do things that are cool. And White Wolf made role playing, especially live action role play, cool in a way that had never been cool before. It was suddenly the thing, Oh, we've got a cool super chat.
You gonna read this one?
Necroplayer, thank you, sir. He's a kobold, by the way. That's the dragon kobold version there. A good thing to nod at World of Darkness for is that there's a module for almost everyone, between vampires, werewolves, mages, changelings, wraiths, mummies, and hunters. I just wish there was more. Hey, good news. There's also they had the Frankenstein monster ones. I forget what they were called, and they had the Orpheus group, which is all about dreams. So there is in fact more than just the ones you listed here. Yeah, you're right. It did create not just one culture. We talked about vampire because it was the first and the biggest. But werewolf the Apocalypse is one of my favorite role-playing games of all time. Mage is an exceptionally well-crafted game. And there's a lot of source books that were really, really cool. Some of them not so much. We will talk about cursed books at some point. We'll talk about World of Darkness.
Wait. We're gonna talk about those White Wolf books.
Yeah, probably.
All right.
Yeah. We'll talk about cursed books. White Wolf had its share. Yeah. God, what was that called? I'll have to look it up later. But they'd had a book for playing Frankenstein monsters type, like golems.
So you've touched on something here that I think is pretty cool, Necro, and that there is a cultural gap between the LARP groups for these games. In my area, the second most popular is definitely Werewolf, right? And whereas you might have a very gothic, kind of naturally vampy vibe for the Camarilla in Vampire the Masquerade, Werewolf, they're playing in the woods, dude. They have meetups at campgrounds and do LARP weekends out there in the forest. They have bonfires and stuff. Like it's a real thing, and it's a entirely different energy. Also a cool activity.
Yeah, I would say that the World of Darkness was the biggest shift we had since the birth of D&D until Critical Role and streaming came along. So, like, you've got the pre-World of Darkness era, post-World of Darkness era, pre-streaming era, post-streaming era. Like, those are the kind of the big benchmarks of change for how gaming is perceived and gaming is interacted with for role-playing games.
Firmly agreed.
People, so, you guys don't get it. Like, and I'm sorry, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Vera. But I don't think they get just how crazy it was. People would take a vampire clan and make that their identity. They would take their character from the game and make that their life. I mean, it was big. It was a big enough influence that people were like remaking themselves to better fit with it. Does that track with you, Vera?
Oh, absolutely. Again, you still see a little of this, I would say.
What's your clan?
Guess.
I'm gonna guess Bruja.
Malkavian.
Okay, that would be the second one.
So it's best that I don't remake myself in that image probably today. I am flattered by Bruja, though.
Mine was Ventru, for anybody who's curious. But you know, it's fine. Like
strong.
It doesn't matter. Like again, that was a very long time ago. Nowadays, it might be more like Nosferatu. I don't know. But yeah, so there's so many impacts on our everyday life that we take for granted or we didn't. The reason I brought this up to Vera is like as an idea is like it was born from, you know, I don't think people know how much Star Wars comes from role-playing games. And she's like, okay, well, we should do that. We should talk about all its influences through everything. I was like, okay, that's probably a better fit for a 3-hour episode.
It's such an interesting subject. It's like it's sort of sprawling. Like if you want to get into ludology a little bit, there's an angle here where like giving somebody a character that they can really invest in and identify with to the point that it starts to eclipse parts of their persona is a great success of game design, right? Because that get this woman a fish, hey. I used to have like a spinning fish in my head in my 3D setup, but it no longer works. We'll bring it back someday. It can be the fish Malkavian. That's what we need around here. Yeah, the idea even of like create a character, a customizable persona, is something we kind of owe to role-playing games, right? That's what it takes to play a role in a lot of cases, is being able to tailor that role to your interests, to your desired dynamic. And this has become ubiquitous, right? There are so many games where you have character customization now, right? It's like a really significant portion of all video games, right?
Particularly MMOs, I would argue.
Yeah, it's essential there. But people, again, like they want to make their little Borbos. They're hashtag your guys. And this stems from role-playing games. Because in the wargaming era, you would make like, oh, here's General Archibald. He was the hero of the Union in the Civil War. He led these boys down the Mississippi. Like, that's sort of create a character, right? But not in the same way. Not in quite the same way.
And I should point out too that D&D was a gateway. It's difficult again for me to understate just how much of a gateway D&D was to everything else. My first sight of a Warhammer mini was in the pages of Dragon magazine as an advertisement. The first time I saw Space Marines was in a White Dwarf, a Dragon magazine, not a White Dwarf. Although White Dwarf was a role-playing game magazine you could buy, but Dragon was the D&D house organ, the house magazine, and they showed off all kinds of stuff. The Expanse. Anybody here is a fan of The Expanse? That's based on a role-playing game campaign that these guys ran, in case you didn't know.
Yeah, and Disco Elysium is derived from a setting they were making. They were just making that as a tabletop game, then turned into that instead. Can we talk ludology a little bit? Because there was a cool question earlier that I wanted to circle to, if I can find it.
For sure. I love talking about ludology. Like I said, it's a pan-disciplinary study.
It very much is. So Face Octopus asks how much game theory is in ludology, because it's about rational agents, and you would know better than I, but I took one class of pure math in college, and I suffered for the sake of being a better game designer. And I would say that knowing what is optimal is one extreme of game design, right? The other extreme is what feels good, and that can come in from a lot of different places. But I would go so far as to say that role-playing games are the source of that emphasis on what feels good to do in games, right?
So game theory has a lot to do with ludology, but it is I would argue it's a little more shallower, on a shallower level when it comes to ludology, because a lot of what ludology encompasses is, well, okay, so there's, if you want to chart a graph, you've got like one line on the graph that you plot is complexity, and one graph is depth. And you ideally want those two to intersect at a point which is lower. Thank you, Vera, for being my visual aid. Everyone, my assistant Vera is going to show you how this looks on a graph. But if you have those two, if you plot depth and complexity on a graph, you ideally want them to intersect at a point which is generally low or middle rather than high, because high complexity makes a game inaccessible. It makes a game difficult to learn. It makes the game difficult to play. Okay. But complexity is a factor that makes games more interesting. This is why we typically don't play a lot of tic-tac-toe or Candyland, much as fun as those games are, because there's not a lot of complexity. And from complexity is born depth. That's just one example of game theory and ludology where they intersect. But that's on I would argue, a fairly shallow end of game theory, whereas the deeper ends of game theory, they drift into some pretty deep mathematical formulae and concepts that are probably outside of your typical board game or role-playing game. But yeah, it does touch on it. Does that sound right to you?
Oh, absolutely. Because like you do get to some related concepts, but ultimately, most of the experience of a role-playing game takes place outside of optimal decision making in combat. However, there is a bottom line. There is a bottom line where if you do the most optimal thing, you can have a detrimental impact on game balance and other people's fun. Like there's, in more complicated systems, especially, often a few ways to completely destroy encounters, and this can be positive or negative depending on how your table feels and how prepared they are for that.
Well, you can frame the elements of a role-playing game that appeal most to you. Like for me, it's like creative problem solving or player agency. Those are things I really enjoy. Opportunities for those things can be mathematically expressed in game theory. Anybody who's seen A Beautiful Mind, right? The scene where they talk about like, trying to, who's going to go for the redhead in the bar, right? You can define certain terms that are more appealing than just pure optimization with game theory and math and ludology. And I would argue that modern ludology is more about the feel. it's more about mathematically aiming for a harmonious blend of depth and complexity, a harmonious blend of interaction and choice and agency. You can plot those on a graph. So yes, it's doable. Your point though about optimization being a thing that can break the game, yeah, absolutely. And we should really do a whole episode on min-maxing optimization at some point.
Yeah, that could be quite interesting. Like in terms of how things feel, like an example is like the way that a 1d10 damage die is different than a 1d6 plus 2 damage die, because on average they're both 5.5, but the way they feel is pretty different. So
right, yeah, one's got a higher minimum, which part of ludology is understanding that human brains tend to fixate on the extremes of luck rather than the averages of luck. So a higher baseline is more attractive to a typical gamer than a wider range. This is why the greatsword in D&D, which is a 2d6, is mathematically better than the 1d12 great axe. Even though they have a very similar range of numbers. The greatsword just starts at 2 as its base as opposed to 1, and has an average of 7 as opposed to 6. This is part of ludology. These are things you have to know when you're designing a game and building weapons and gear and trying to figure out, like, how to create a satisfying play loop without too high of a whiff factor. Whiff factor is something that's a big part of both Dark Heresy and Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, so it's something I've had to struggle with. There's terms like death spirals. Ludology includes a lot of terms that come from role-playing games, because that's where they, you engage with a role-playing game in a very different manner than you typically do with a board game or a card game.
Yeah, it's interesting because in the world of role-playing games, you start to encounter concepts like imbalance, where it's narratively appropriate for things to not be fair, which sort of flies in the face of a lot of like game design in history, right?
Well, I think you and I have talked about this before. First of all, Necro player, shout out to Eldritch Blast and 1d10 plus 5. I think you and I have talked about this before, where balance is a great ideal, but in practice, it's actually it tends to remove flavor.
Yeah, the perfectly balanced game is boring. It doesn't feel good because everybody does the same thing. No hate to chess, I'm sure, but okay, sure, but yawn. Also yawn. So,
well, if I may, I'd like to talk about 2 different game systems really quick when it comes to game.
Yeah.
All right, the first one I'd like to talk about is D&D 4th edition, and the second one I'd like to talk about is Palladium's Rifts game. So D&D 4th edition is possibly the most balanced edition of Dungeons & Dragons, in that everyone had very similar options. Everyone was able to do similar damage, depending a little bit on your role and what choices you made in character creation. But it was structurally built in such a way that it strongly emphasized you choosing from a predefined list of maneuvers. I want to use X ability, I want to use Y ability, I want to use Z ability. And that was very well balanced. In my opinion, D&D 4th edition would make an excellent board game because everything is generally within the bounds of what you want it to do, mechanically speaking. However, for me, one of my issues with D&D 4th edition was the fact that I felt constrained to only pick from the maneuvers available to me. And I felt like I would actively be hurting my party by improvising or trying to do something interesting and cool, as opposed to picking one of my preset abilities. Because there were people out there depending on me to mark a thing, or to stop a guy from moving, or to do a certain amount of damage, because that's the way that the abilities interlocked, and they work together as they were complementary. But it required you to limit your options, in my opinion. Now, I found that to be pretty boring. I found that to be an experience that I was like, this would make a great board game. It's not so interesting to me from a role-playing standpoint.
Yeah, because your obligation, the game systems dictate your character's actions. Your agency as a player becomes hampered by this. You are responsible for doing things that are not interesting to you, which is not a good feeling. That is feel bad. This is a technical term, ludology, feel bad.
It literally is a technical term. I know it sounds weird, but it's true. You feel bad. I have used it in many conversations about design. Then there's Rifts, Palladium's Rifts. Now, Rifts is the opposite end of the spectrum. Rifts is not balanced in any way at all. You could play a guy who is a city rat, and you're like, I'm a hacker who has some stealth skills and a knife and maybe a cool pistol. And your buddy is like, cool, I'm going to play a glitter boy. Glitter boys are mech pilots. Well, not technically a mech. It's more like a power suit, but it's a 10-foot tall power suit with one of the most powerful weapons in the entire game strapped to it. And it's incredibly difficult to kill. These two things are not at all in the same ballpark. And to make matters worse, the glitter boy can basically do everything that a city rat can do. Like there's very, very little that a city rat can do that a glitter boy couldn't if he really wanted to. And here's the thing. Rifts was insanely fun. Rifts was fun as hell. I have my issues with that game system as well. We could talk about it at length at some point in the future. But the inherent balance being gone actually was a feature, not a bug. So I think the happy medium is somewhere in between, but ultimately, and this is my like serious opinion as a game designer, and I'd like to hear Vera's thoughts on this too, but my serious opinion as a game designer is that balance is a wonderful ideal, but it is secondary to the fun experience of the game.
Balance, I think, is a guideline that should be moved away from to find treasures off the beaten path. Like in a fantasy roleplay, ogres and elves are not balanced.
Now I want Jeffrey Rush to come out and say it's more like a guideline.
The game designer's code. It's
Right.
creating like really interesting tension though, and like again, this is role-playing games at work because for much of human history, when you imbalanced a game, it was actually for the sake of balance. Of playing chess with a handicap, for example, playing golf with a handicap. The idea is to make it more fair. In the land of role-playing games, you imbalance them to create difference and meaningful choice, to allow expression, right? Going back to Harmontown, Dan Harmon's character was a terrible coward who did not do anything useful in many combats because he was a baby. And that is not balanced. His contribution was basically nada in a lot of these encounters, but it made him interesting. It was like for the sake of the thing, and it was fun for him to accomplish nothing. That's the beauty of a role-playing game, is you can win by losing, right?
That's a cornerstone of ludology, is that the fun of the game is not necessarily dependent on any of the math or any of the mechanics. It can be based solely on the interactions at the table or interactions with the game. So yeah, we see this a lot. I mean, even Critical Role has got moments where characters can be essentially nerfed or useless, and they're still great to have along, and they could be part of some of the most amazing and most memorable experiences. So that's why I consider it to be a lesser goal, because ultimately for me, it's all, can I make a game people enjoy and have a fun time with? Everything else is secondary to that.
Yep. It is an important guideline though, because if you have one character that does 1d1 damage, and that's all they can do, suddenly you're hard pressed to find your own fun with that one.
Well, this actually plays into a lot of really interesting parts of game design, which is like niche protection, which is the idea of like, can I play a Swiss Army knife character who can do everything, or can I play, or should I be aiming to play a guy who's good at certain things and not good at other things? And I have found in my experience that it is a lot more fun to play a guy who's good at some things and bad at other things than it is to play a guy who's good at everything. You can play Batman and have a great time playing Batman. Batman's good at everything, but it can be a lot more fun and interesting to play Green Lantern or Green Arrow.
Yeah, but like that. So Batman works in two scenarios, right? One, Batman is the only player character. Two, Batman is the player character who is the worst at fighting. Whether he's doing a solo game or whether he's with the league, and both work, but it's distinct. Like, here's an example of asymmetry. It's gonna be close to home for Ross. I have cracked open the book Dark Heresy Ascension as a
yes, intentionally not balanced.
However, we're going one step above. I am cracking open the book Dark Heresy Ascension to play in a Death Watch game.
Ooh,
So-
now we're talking. Now we're talking.
The balance has shifted a lot now, right? We're in strange territories.
Oh, you could. There's some really interesting. Yeah. I can. Yeah. A tech priest, an ascended tech priest would be pretty great. An ascended psychers. You could play. I think you can play. You can play a Vindicator assassin.
Yeah, I was debating. I don't want to get too off topic here, but I was debating trying to incorporate some of the let's say more questionable psychic origins and incorporate that into a Vindicar assassin, because I am our radical inquisitor's touchstone on planet for the Death Watch group. So I can get away with some stuff. And I thought it'd be cute to build out a high willpower, sort of a subtle psyker Vindicar.
Nice.
We'll see it. But so of course this is not balanced at all, because if I get hit by a Chaos Space Marine, I will explode. But that tension is part of the fun of the part of the appeal of it. Really, it's interesting.
Yeah, see, this is why I feel like the unbalanced side is more interesting, because it allows for people to self-limit or explore or come up with stuff that the designer frankly never intended or never saw coming. And there's so many great emergent stories, so many great emergent situations that arise from the idea of, yeah, I'm playing a character who is either way weaker or way stronger than everybody else. Actually, a lot of isekai does this with overpowered main characters, and they tell fantastic stories. I mean, I will point you towards Overlord or I Parry Everything as two good examples of this.
Yeah, because when, like, by default you are just so much more effective, the way that you express your character becomes sort of who they are. Your fun comes from their personality, how they navigate these things, what they do with that. With great power comes great responsibility and great narrative import. Similarly, if you happen to roll a lawyer in The Enemy Within, you are not very effective in combat unless you're throwing like pens at people. So your decision making and how you navigate those situations is very tense, very interesting in its own right. It's a different kind of intriguing, imbalanced situation. And again, like, this is a kind of gameplay that did not exist prior to role-playing games, right?
Yeah, and a lot of this is, of course, I talk about this a lot, that role-playing, to have a good role-playing experience, you need to have a certain level of trust. You need to have a certain level of safety, because it is inherently vulnerable to put yourself out there. It's like, I am actually pretending to be a wizard right now, everybody. It's fine. It's fine. Yeah. But the fact is, like, if there's trust between you and your group, trust between you and your game master, if you feel safe in exploring the idea of a character who is weaker, like a lawyer, then you will probably get rewarded with scenes where being a lawyer is crucial. So goddamn important to be a lawyer in certain scenes. And a good game master will be like, yeah, here you go. Here's some lawyer stuff that nobody else can do. Only you can do it.
Yeah, it's interesting because, like, role-playing games have kind of introduced the concept of a game that you don't have to win, or that you always win, or that everybody wins because nobody wins. This is like a newfangled thing. There were, like, I guess you had like a stick and hoop, which wasn't like
yeah, even cops and robbers or cowboys and Indians as kids, you know, there were winners and losers. But role-playing games, that doesn't necessarily have to be true. The enjoyment is from the weird situations and the memories and the bragging rights and the stories you could tell after it's all over. At least for me, those are my favorite bits.
Yeah, like that, the experience and the journey is sort of the important part there, right? Like, I'm a competitive person, right? When I play games like Deadlock, when I play games like Dota 2, this is very bad. Don't do this. This is me expressing some kind of like gamer masochism. Don't play MOBAs. But I don't have fun when I lose. Not in the same way, right? You want to win the damn thing. at a tabletop session, I'm stoked to be there. The entire experience is positive. It is a chance to flex my tactical ability, to think about narrative elements, and to do it in a context where kind of whatever happens, I'm stoked to do it again.
Yeah, because a role-playing game recontextualizes failure. You don't a character who fails in a role-playing game doesn't necessarily mean you didn't have fun, because failure can be hilarious. It can be an opportunity for more spotlight time. It can be an opportunity to tell more of your character's story. It can be an opportunity for growth and change and development of your character. Failure is not necessarily bad. And that's big, because if you're playing a board game or a card game or most video games, that is the opposite. Like, hey, I'm bad at this game. I'm not doing very well. I'm not having fun because I'm not doing very well. And role-playing games, like, I'm not doing very well, and this is hilarious.
You fail in Dota a few times in a row. You're there with a cup of Baileys at 3 a.m. rethinking your entire life up to that moment. It's a very different experience.
Well, I would point to Will Wheaton and his cursed die rolling in Critical Role is a great example of this. He shows up, he has a great time. Everybody has a great time because Will's a great guy and he enjoys engaging with people. He just can't roll dice to save his freaking life. Sometimes literally save his life. And that's fine. I have a player at one of my tables that tends to roll on the lower side, and it's like, oh no, the dice have cursed you again. But you learn how to turn that into a positive thing. You're like, okay, I failed. I rolled a natural one trying to show off. Okay, cool. I'm going to use that to have a little character growth and be like, maybe I shouldn't show off in public like this. It's kind of dangerous. Or you could tell part of your character story. My master was always telling me I shouldn't try this. Turns out he was right.
Yeah, like, we're talking about the influence of role-playing games. This concept, failure being its own sort of success state, I think is almost best exemplified in Disco Elysium, wherein failing at checks is almost always the more interesting option. Like, you suddenly wind up in this like catastrophic farce where this drunk maniac is like attacking old ladies. It's just fascinating, right? And that is its own reward. So you don't get that without role-playing games. That whole concept has emerged from the sphere of trying to make a natural one interesting, because saying, okay, I fail, okay, you don't do it, is kind of boring. But you can put so much life into it. It turns into the improv exercise that stems from the mechanical balance. If you've got a character who's really good at a task and they fail at it anyway, perhaps that is for a good reason, or it's for some interesting reason, or it plays into what's going on with them, or this or that, or these other things. And there's so much potential there.
Yeah, I've told the story of the guys trying to disarm a nuclear bomb in one of my games where they failed. And I had to think on my feet and come up with something because I didn't want to stop playing. And I think a great example of this, actually, you can see in a video game, Fallout New Vegas. If you play the Dead Money DLC, there's a character you need to interact with called Dean Domino. And Dean is a prideful son of a bitch. So if you succeed at all your skill checks with Dean, he dislikes you, and you can't actually keep him alive throughout the DLC. You have to end up killing him because he sees you as a rival. That's a wonderful bit of programming that they did to make New Vegas feel more alive and more interesting, is that they gave a failure state an advantage that you otherwise wouldn't be able to get, for example.
Winning is losing. Like, of course it pisses them off, right?
Can be. There's also, of course, Fallout is very famous for having a lot of low intelligence skill speech checks that are hilarious.
So good.
It's so much fun. It's honestly super fun to play like a incredibly dumb person in Fallout.
Yeah, like, I get a lot of that experience in real life, so I've not tried it before, but you'll have to someday.
Very good. Very good. So are there ways that you've noticed with your students or with the guys in the D&D club where they have knowingly or not interacted with the influence of role-playing games in their lives?
I think it's got to be knowingly, because like these kids are gamers, right? We're in the era of them finding ways to run Steam on their Chromebooks, right? I got to get kids to stop playing Genshin Impact in class, etc. Like we're all the way there, right?
Right. We have gone. We are fully in the that era. Yes.
I definitely see it in how kids approach me about writing because I this is foolish of me, but I have told all of my students that I write for Warhammer, which I is now a danger because if they look up like, oh, who streams on Twitch that writes for Warhammer, it's a very small group of people. But I get asked by kids like about writing a lot. I'm asked about like setting development, about like how to get into the business and so on, and I have seen firsthand that a lot of that writing takes the structure of like wiki entries for a tabletop setting or for a book. Like there's this new paradigm for how development is done for a narrative that I would say stems largely from role-playing games and their influence. I'm not sure how I feel about that in the case of narrative, like a short story or a novel, though, because I think that while it's important to have a well versed out world and a well developed setting, it's perhaps not the best place to start with fleshing out everything that would be needed to run a campaign in your setting.
Yeah, we had this problem back in my day too, where world building in the 80s and 90s was very much in the Tolkien frame, right? The idea that if you're going to build the world, especially your own campaign world, you had to build every last detail. You had to build every region, every species. You know,
step one, write 3 languages.
Right. So fortunately, you know, we managed to graduate out of that because people got burned out really freaking fast. This guy got burned out really fast. And we found that world building for role-playing games worked a lot better if you just designed what you needed. Like we're in a town. I can world build a town a lot easier and quicker than I can world build an entire planet or an entire nation or entire culture. Start small.
Ross, who collects the taxes?
Well, I mean, there are still gamers. I have friends who are that kind of gamer who will dive into every last encyclopedic aspect of a world, and that's fine. Like I admire them. I think that's great if that's what they want. And there's people out there who do love that. It's just not for me, and I found it to be detrimental to being a game designer and being a world builder. It's much better, much easier to start off small. I'll give you a great example: The Mandalorian. Right? Star Wars is a big ass galaxy. There's a lot going on. The Mandalorian's like, okay, we're not going to worry about too much of that. We're going to pick a planet. Maybe not even an entire planet. We're just going to pick like a part of like a city or a town. And the Mando is like picking up a guy from a bounty hunt or dropping him off from a bounty hunt. And that's where we start. And just, you know, you have some buildings, you have some, you know, some grimy rim worlders types. You've got a bounty hunter and you've got, you know, the guy who collects, who tells you how much the bounty's worth. And that's all you really needed to know to have a really sweet ass Western adventure with The Mandalorian.
You know, keeping things tight can be really effective, like for plenty of reasons, you know.
Super effective, in my opinion. But anyway, yeah, you touched on a thing that was important, which is like the how world building has developed and grown. And role playing games are, as I've mentioned before, are one of the most intimate ways to immerse yourself into an IP or a world or a franchise. Warhammer 40K, for a long time, you didn't know what it was like for an average person in the Imperium, because it was all about the big armies and the Space Marines and the Guardsmen and the Tyranid aliens from beyond the galaxy. So you couldn't zoom in, or at least you didn't feel like you could zoom in because you were so far removed from typical standard life. And it took the role-playing games to kind of, and the novels, can't discount the Dan Abnett novels, but it took getting you down to that level to immerse you in that much more intimate way to engage with that setting and that world in a way that was different from the fully pulled back, you know, I'm a general commanding an army.
Yeah, it's interesting because that kind of on the ground development over the decades has created sort of the opposite of itself, because people look at these collectives of everything that's ever been written for a setting and they think, okay, here's where I start. There's some kind of misapprehension going on, right?
Yeah, there's a reason why the Forgotten Realms, which we've talked about as a setting, there's reasons why the Forgotten Realms is vast but also shallow until you get to places like the Sword Coast, for example, and then it gets like super deep and super developed and super accessible to a D&D group.
But this style of writing, I just do think stems from role-playing games. You read like let's say more classical fiction, and like, all right, here's the river, here's the guy's house, here's the rich man's house, here's the important part of the woods, and that's your setting, right? Like, it's more character driven in that way. We're in an era where proper nouns have a lot of weight.
There's a role-playing game about barbarians. I want to say it's Barbarians of Lemuria, but it might be something else. But I remember that the world building was actually part of the character creation, and you would say, I am this type of character, and you define that character with a few keywords, like I am, strong, courageous, or determined, something like that.
Same.
And then you would take a piece of paper and draw a line, and on the opposite end of that line, you would define a part of the world that was the opposite of what you are. So you'd be like, okay, so I am, if I am Conan the Barbarian, for example, then over here is this decadent civilization that is, very richly political and very, everyone's scheming and plotting against each other, but they have no honor and they have no concept of courage. Right. And I kind of love that. I love that there are games like Smallville that do this as well, where you're building out the world. Famously, the Dresden Files role-playing game did this as well, where you would, as part of character creation, you'd start to establish, like, I want to encounter this thing in our game. I want to deal with this thing in our game. And it became a collaborative world building process where it wasn't entirely on the game master's shoulders. Hex crawls do this to a lesser extent.
I like that a lot. There's a somewhat similar structure in Fabula Ultima's character creation process, where you fill in together elements like how things work metaphysically in the world, things you want to see, and so on. I think that's like a cool extension of like the concept of player agency, where it's more like player, but wait, instead of player agency, it's player agency. Yeah, okay. Meta agency.
You're drunk, Vera. Go home. No, for real. So what's fascinating to me is like how far role-playing games have developed along different lines. Like if you go back to the 70s and 80s, it was all about simulationism. It was all about like how can we use the mechanics of a game to simulate reality and have a rule for basically everything. Have a simulation for basically everything. And now, that pendulum swung very far the other direction. Now we've got games that are like one page, like Lasers and Feelings. We've got the Dungeon World, where it's really more about the moves that you can do, but it's also Dungeon World's like a great example of like taking fourth edition's balanced approach and saying, okay, but what if it was more open to interpretation and less strictly defined? And you've got there's fascinating mechanics. We're going to discuss a whole bunch of them on this show eventually, because I want to talk about Maid and I want to talk about feng shui, and these are developments of how to role play that go in a completely opposite direction from simulationism, that instead embrace the emergent narrative of players' choices and the way they choose to Maid specifically has a great failure state mechanic where you have to spend the next 10 minutes of real time freaking out in character when you're out of a certain resource, for example. It's lovely. It's fantastic. It's baked in, and I'm really excited to see where role-playing games go from here, because they've come a long way, and there's still plenty of room for ways to engage our imaginations and build emergent stories between people around a table just having a great time eating Cheetos and drinking Mountain Dew.
Yeah, I think it's an exciting time. I've noticed, like, in the current wave of role-playing games, a lot that are driven by sort of a macro concept for the sort of essence they want the game experience to have. Uh, there was definitely a period where a lot of games were driven by setting and by fleshing out a world that you could draw on for that, and that gave you the spirit of it. But I'm finding in the last just couple of years, there have been a number of games that really focus in on tone through mechanical representation and through reinforcing what kind of vibe the table should have. I think to games like a Heart and Spire. I think to games like Draw Steel. I think to games like a 10,000 Swords Towards Heaven, where the essence is very much trying to evoke a certain emotion through how you interact with game systems.
Yeah, have you seen Burning Empire or Mouse Guard?
I have seen Mouse Guard. I do like Mouse Guard. I've not seen Burning Empire, though.
Well, Mouse Guard is like an evolution or if you will, a layer on top of Burning Empire. So
okay.
if you see Mouse Guard, you're at least familiar with some of the basics of Burning Empire.
The mice are burning.
God, I hope not. But yeah, we have a couple of comments here that I think are really good. We got one from Mickey Stopwatch. Avoid the wikification of your world. I will say that if you have a campaign that's been going a long time, wikis can be a great tool. So I hear you. I see where you're coming from. But also,
there are two flavors, right? On one hand, if you have enough material to make a wiki fleshed out, that's awesome. Huge success, probably really useful to keep track of it. On the other hand, if you develop things for the sake of filling out a wiki, you are going in perhaps a not as useful direction.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Do you have any concrete examples from your experience, either DMing or playing, where you were faced with a setting that had far too much or far too little material?
So I am the kind of player that wants to sink my teeth into things. My frustration when playing Dungeon World has been how really isolated it feels. And you can get past this. This is something you can get around. You can do your own development. You can collaboratively build things out, but it feels a little bit too much like a sudden improv session to me. It's not got that back end to support the history in any way. And I like having at least a little bit to bite my teeth into, you know?
Yeah, so for me, the mechanic I would point to here is the interludes that Savage Worlds uses. Are you familiar with this?
Not in depth, no.
Okay, I'll try to explain it briefly.
Please.
So a standard deck of cards is actually part of your tools for Savage Worlds because it uses a lot of card-based mechanics. And an interlude is an opportunity for the game master to basically call for improved material about your character's story. What it does is the structure of it works like this. The game master will say, okay, I need an interlude from you guys about memories you have regarding the mentor who sent you on this mission. You find some kind of context to give them a starting point. Okay. And then the cards give them another starting point because the cards, depending on the suit, tells you the tone and adds a little more context for what your improv needs to be. Is it tragic? Is it about a loved one? Is it about something that you want, or is it about a triumph? A tragedy, triumph, desire, or romance. Basically, are the options. And then the other aspect is the card value is your initiative order, essentially, for who goes first to tell their little story. So an interlude is meant to be 30 30, 60 seconds, maybe 2 minutes if you're really wordy, just to be able to say, the game master can say again, hey, give me some thoughts on your mentor. And everybody around the table then spends 30 seconds talking about their character's relationship with the mentor. And that can be really cool. It can also be very intimidating for someone who's not used to improv or wasn't paying attention, or it's their first game, or they barely know their character. It's a mechanic that works well for a group where everyone understands how role playing works and understands their characters and is willing to, expound on that in front of everybody else. It's a fun mechanic. I enjoy it, but it is intimidating. And I have seen people freeze like a deer in the headlights. So when you were talking about Dungeon World and how it can feel like an improv session, I do feel like Dungeon World asks sometimes for on the spot improvisation. 7C had this also as a real issue. I remember one of my friends was talking about a game he played with the designer where the designer's like, okay, you open the chest, inside you find a letter. And the designer says, now tell me 5 things about the letter. And I was like horrified. I was like, oh my God,
powerful.
That's powerful, but that's too much. Like I was like, 3 things about the letter I could manage. 3 things, sure. And I'm a very experienced role player. But if it's somebody brand new, I'd be like, tell me 1 thing about the letter. And that could be who sent it, what the handwriting's like, did they sign it? Just one little detail is a lot more manageable than 5, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Read me the letter and tell me other letters it reminds you of.
Oh God, yeah, right. Like that feels. Is that how Dungeon World would do it?
Oh, not quite, but like Dungeon World has no setting, right? So you run into a scenario kind of rapidly where you're compounding like improv based concepts, like who your character is and what they do, and because there's nothing codified, you have to keep it in mind. And then you naturally, when you're playing in character, you run into things that relate to not the immediate thread of the narrative. You want to talk about past experiences and stuff, and it feels like a very the sandbox has no decorations in it. It's up to you to create the towers and whatnot, so it suffers from that.
Yeah, this was what I dealt with transitioning from Dark Heresy to Rogue Trader, which is Rogue Trader is very much a sandbox game. You have your own ship, you have your own agenda. Dark Heresy is not that. You probably don't have a ship, and you definitely don't have your own agenda. You're doing what the Inquisitor tells you to do, which that was a big paradigm shift, and it involved a lot of game design to make those things meaningful.
Yeah, because Rogue Trader winds up being about discovery in a lot of cases, right? Which makes that easier to swallow. Whereas Dark Heresy is about comparing your mission brief to what's actually happening, which is a different kind of discovery.
Or we have a whole episode with Mike Mason where we talk about what Dark Heresy was and how it was based on Call of Cthulhu and how it's influenced Call of Cthulhu. So go check that out. Hey, by the way, if you are enjoying our deep dives into role-playing games, do us a favor and hit that like and subscribe button, because we need to spread our heresy to more unsuspecting minds, and the algorithm helps us do that.
Yes, press all of the buttons. You know what you can do? You can leave a comment on this stream. It's a VOD type thing.
It's very helpful if you leave a comment on YouTube or Twitch.
Talk about fishmen. We all like these.
We have a lot of fishmen enthusiasts. Biofoot is the leader of the Fishman Renaissance.
So I'm in a few like circles of VTubers who really like Warhammer stuff, and recently a friend was showing me beastmen that have been green stuff to have fish heads and all sorts of cod coming out of it. It's great. So I immediately
Nice. Yeah. Send me the link to that. We'll put it on our show for Lorebeards 40K.
I will try and get the photo. I meant to save it. I got to ask again.
Also, we have a great Discord if you want to join it. Become one of the lore seekers, which is part of what we call our community. It's a very active Discord. You can learn what's coming new for the Lorebeards, get alerts about our upcoming shows, sometimes even vote on what we're planning to do in the future. All right, so Vera, how far have we gone down the rabbit hole on the influence of role-playing games?
I'm very pleased we've gotten like so conceptual with it. I like getting high concept. You know this.
we are planning to invite you over on Lorebeards 40K to talk about some metaphysical stuff like faith or the Emperor.
Ooh, I'm excited. Please let me know. Yeah.
Yeah, we can't wait. But yeah, in terms of influence of role playing games, I mean, it's systemic. It's been over 50 years at this point. They're a part of our world. They're a part of almost every form of entertainment. They're a part of, as we said, they're a part of every large learning model in AI and computer science and neuroscience. They're a part of, which I think it's lovely now that they're also a part of mental health and counseling. So.
Yeah, like it's such a new paradigm for what a creative activity can be. And it's a modern contrivance. We just didn't have this prior to like 40 years ago?
51 years ago. I think it was 76. Yeah.
Time is hard.
So 77, I think, is when the game was released. I think 76 is when they were building it, if I remember correctly. I could be wrong. I think that's correct, though.
Wait, but the 70s were 30 years ago.
That's how I think of them. That's exactly how I think of them.
It's a neat thing though. Like games are like my passion, right? And I yours as well. I feel lucky to have experienced sort of this what I think of as a golden age in like game concepts, like what interactive media can be.
It is. It absolutely is a golden age right now. For a long time, it was. So for a long time in the early 80s, late 70s, early 80s, role-playing game books were badly laid out. They were badly indexed. They were badly organized. You could go look at Advanced Dungeons & Dragons and try to find where weapon proficiencies are, because it's not exactly clear, for example. But that is improved, right? Things have changed. The accessibility, the way you can interact with it has greatly improved. And as we said, it's no longer something that is shunned by society. It has become, it's become mainstream, which is again amazing. The late 1990s, says Godzilla Rex. Yeah,
in the late 20th century.
So it used to be that you could the only place you could find your role-playing games was at a game store, and they were big books. They were badly laid out books. So parsing what the game meant was part of the experience. Now, fortunately, that's no longer the case. Fortunately, nowadays we live in a golden age where you can just go to drivethrurpg.com and download just about anything you want right then, right there. There's tons of indie sites. There's gaming has never been more accessible. Finding players has never been easier. It's still not necessarily easy. I had to put out an ad on Facebook to find someone for my Star Wars game, for example, but it is easier now than it has ever been.
Yeah, they're in the public consciousness. You no longer have to explain to somebody kind of what that is and convince them you're not trying to abduct them, right?
Oh yeah. Oh God.
Let me get this straight. You want me to meet up with who and pretend to be a what?
Yeah. Those were. Yeah, there was a lot of that back in the day. Some places were easier. Like I was in the military, and in the Army, it was very easy to find gamers for some reason. Junior enlisted, which is what I was in the Army, it was very easy to find a group in the barracks and just start playing. I'm not saying that every soldier was a gamer, but everywhere I went, there was gamers, and I had a game pretty regularly. College was the same way.
I've definitely seen photos of guys in Desert Storm playing Warhammer with sticks and rocks.
Hawk has a comment here. Says, my boss came to me one time to translate what an applicant had said in their job interview about their D&D character as a reflection of them. I bet that was a fun conversation.
Ooh, that's intriguing.
When I was hiring people at Fantasy Flight Games, we got a resume that was a character sheet. And I was like, this guy gets it. Like, I wanted to hire him right then, but I knew we had to interview him.
Oh, that's fun. I might steal that idea.
If you're playing at a tabletop game company, it's no reason why not to. If you're going to work if you wanted to work at Green Ronin full time or Cubicle 7 full time, yeah, sending a resume as a character sheet, I endorse it.
I'd love to go full time at some point.
I've been lucky. I've been able to be a full-time game designer several times. I was a full-time game designer for Ulysses. I was a full-time game designer for Fantasy Flight. And obviously, video games as well. That's a full-time job, but it is extremely rare. At least at one point in the past, there were more astronauts than there were full-time tabletop role-play game designers.
Hey, in this highly specialized career path, you guessed it, it's part of the influence of RPGs. Hey.
Yeah, I just wish that RPGs came with more money. That's the industry has never been. It is not a place to go and be rich as a tabletop game designer. If you harbor ambitions of becoming a tabletop game designer full time, I would say that you want to keep your expectations of pay low. And if you're doing it freelance, definitely keep your expectations low.
Yeah, if you want to get like genuine riches, go the lucrative path of VTubing.
Video games is where it's at. Like that's where the real money is these days. For like I don't love it, but that's where my career has led, and so I've done a lot of full-time video game design, and it is far more lucrative than, like, at least 2 or 3 times more lucrative than working full-time in the tabletop industry.
Well, yeah, and if you're in a small studio and you have equity and the game does well, you're pretty happy, right?
That can be true. Yeah. If you're with a larger studio, it can still be true. When I worked at Vigil in Texas, Austin, Texas, I was working on Darksiders 2, and I was working on a canceled 40K MMO called Dark Millennium Online. And I was astounded because it's the first time I'd ever left the tabletop industry to go to the video game industry. I was astounded because they served us dinner every night. They brought in a massage. They had a massage, a masseuse in a special room where you could get up from your desk and just go get a massage. They had special days where they would like bring in a food truck outside and everybody would get like In-N-Out burgers for free. It was wild.
This sounds pretty nice, Ross. We don't have this at the high school I teach at. We don't
I
have
know
chairs, and
I know they need it. Like, I mean, that's high school is like the perfect place for that stuff.
I'm gonna pitch something at the next staff meeting. What I need is a personal masseuse. Thank you.
I will be able to focus so much more on my syllabus if I have a masseuse to take care of my
imagine
my niggling back pain. But anyway, yeah, here's a comment that's funny. Fokano says there's a lot of overlap between game design and game design from paper to computers. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, like we were talking about this earlier, and a lot of video games development history stems to trying to replicate elements of the tabletop RPG experience, right? Like there's explicit and less direct translations of ideas and concepts from D&D. There's efforts to bring like the NPCs, like Ross was saying, that whole concept stems from role-playing games. It is they are similar jobs in some ways.
Did I miss for this long that Ross worked on Darksiders? I've got the skull right up there.
It's the boy. It's the boy.
If you played Darksiders 2 and you picked up any item in that game, I wrote the description for the item. If you played any of the DLCs for Darksiders 2, I wrote the DLCs. I worked on the script and some of the quests and some of that for the main game as well. So that's if you're a Darksiders fan, Darksiders 2 is where you want to go because that's what I worked on. Yeah, so I mean, we've covered a lot of stuff here. This is we've managed to take up a lot of time talking about how RPGs have influenced the world we live in today. They've influenced us too personally. Is there any story that you want to tell about how role-playing games have altered the course of your trajectory?
Well, at one time in college, I got really into playing this tabletop game called Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. And I wrote a lot of things for that game. I did a lot of like development for my character and custom careers and narrative beats. And I wrote up locations and things. And then I had a suggestion from a friend. I submitted those to a company called Cubicle 7. who happened to quite like some of the work that I did. And then I wound up writing on a couple of books for them, as a matter of fact. And that has shaped a lot of my like presence online and like what I do creatively, because I have met a lot of cool people there. Like this guy, Ross Watson, who was one of the head developers for a couple of the 40K games, who worked on Darksiders 2, who's won some awards for his work. Pretty all right. You might like him.
Very funny. But I think if you think back to playing that first Whiffer game, I think it's something ignited within you to want to create for it, to present your particular thoughts about it to other people and get them to engage with it. I think that interactivity may have been at the core of that. I don't know. You tell me.
Yeah, more genuinely, like going back to my forum role play days, that was what got me into writing creatively. It made me passionate about it, because writing, as you know, can be a very lonely activity. It is isolating sometimes to work on drafts for a long period of time. When you're going back and forth play by post, you're engaged in a creative exercise where you're flexing all of the muscles that it takes to write compelling work. But it's with peers. It's fun. It's friendly. And having that feedback gave me the motivation to spend a lot of time in middle and high school and onward writing and developing that ability. And the kernel of that was these were role-playing games. They were play-by-post in their way. They were practically no rules at all in some cases, other than common sense. But they really awakened that passion in me to keep making stuff. And I knew I wanted to write things that would then be fun for other people as well. And I'm glad I've been able to do that as part of my like career trajectory, right? It's been a really rewarding thing.
Yeah, and there's something special about writing for a role-playing game, because you're not writing for some anonymous audience. You're not writing in complete isolation, because you're writing in a way that you want people to interact with it. You want to evoke a certain reaction or interaction from the things that you write. You want people to read something and go, "Oh, cool, I want to go there and talk to that guy," or "I want to go there and kill that guy," or "I want to go there and romance that guy," right? Those are the things that excite me about writing for role-playing games. Is I'm not just writing them for me. I'm writing them for everybody who's going to be reading that book, using that book in their game table, and having a good time interacting with it.
Yeah, it's a chance to write for my peers, like people that I respect and want to have the same positive experience as I have had. And it's a really nice thing.
Yeah, well, we have covered a lot of ground. This episode is possibly one of our broadest topics. I don't know how to put that. We've gone through different eras of time. We've gone through different genres. We've talked about everything from movies in Hollywood to neuroscience and AI, computer programming, and various other things. That's a hell of a lot of that's a hell of a lot of stuff to discuss. I think our listeners are probably going to be like, okay, I need to like sit down and process this for a couple of hours.
Well, you can look into anything we've touched on here and find way more. Like Ross is right. There's academic papers written on this, because again, this is a fundamentally new like paradigm in human cognition. This idea of actively assuming different roles and exploring them. It's a new field. It's groundbreaking. We're in a golden age. We're in a new era of thing. This is the new thing we have now. Please enjoy the new thing. We are gamers. We are in the era of the gamer.
Well, I want to ask you like where you see this going forward, but I would like to briefly touch on where I think.
Please.
So we mentioned this earlier, that one of the fundamental aspects of role playing, putting yourself into another person's shoes, is perspective, and it helps create empathy. It helps foster ideas of cooperation as opposed to competition. And I believe that as the world grows more complex, and as technology advances, and as we grow closer to the ultimate singularity, the inevitable awakening of Skynet, that these things are going to be more important, not less. So just from a standpoint of like the literal human condition, I hope people continue to engage with role-playing games, continue to put themselves out there in, whatever format that might take. It might be, it might just be another Baldur's Gate game or another Disco Elysium that gives you some really amazing emotional highs and lows. It might be sitting around a table with your best friends and learning things about them that you wouldn't ordinarily learn in the course of just being buddies with someone. That's my thought.
Yeah, there's something kind of strong about it because you're able to create your own reality, right? And that's in defiance of whatever reality we're in otherwise. Like VTubing, the whole sphere of VTubing. I myself am a fictional character. That's a lot of fun. No, and that's characteristic of a lot of what that scene is about. And that's also an emerging thing where there's some amount of kayfabe, some amount of playing along. Like, is this really a dog? Maybe, who knows?
I reject your reality and substitute my own. and as the ability to create virtual worlds grows, that can be a very powerful paradigm to have a powerful tool in your toolbox, is understanding how that works.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. People spend a lot of their time in VR chat sometimes. There are people who like practically live in VR a lot of the time. They have well-developed roles they play within these virtual ecosystems and societies that they're part of. I've seen there's like future fiction, like Rick and Morty has a gag about this, where there's like an arcade game where you live the entire life of some schmuck, and that's the game, is you spend a real time 80 years doing whatever this guy does.
Yeah, Star Trek has an episode like that, and I mean, you could look at Second Life and say that is virtual reality. It's just a different, it's not fully haptic, connected to your senses, like, or full dive, I guess is the other term they use. But we will get there. I think that's only a matter of time.
Yeah, I think that we're getting progressively closer. I wouldn't bet on it in the next decade, but maybe in the next two. Like haptic technology for like touch sensation stuff is like very close, but overall sensory input is going to be a ways off. You got to decode more things about the brain first. One of the hardest things to bring forward is aromas and stuff. This is why it can be effective to stink bomb your table.
Yeah, full dive VR is probably not within my lifetime, but it might be within yours, and it might be within some of our listeners. I will say here's one thought I had for applying role playing and virtual reality to the real world. And I wanted to create a gamified rehabilitation program for violent prisoners or violent criminals. And non-violent criminals don't really need that much rehabilitation, frankly. But violent criminals, you could gamify an experience where they log into a VR system and live a life where the rules of that simulation strongly disincentivize violent crime acts of violent crime. And it could be a powerful rehabilitation tool for people who for people who learn differently, for people who need to experience it or need to see it or need to feel it, that they just don't get out of a book. Right. And if you construct this smartly, if you bring in, behavioral scientists and psychologists, and if you apply it directly to what we know about human nature and what's the term? Recidivism. Yeah, sorry, pronouncing that word is hard.
It's a funny word.
Recidivism, where you would relapse into violence as part of your life. If you could disincentivize that through gamification, I think you could change some lives.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, even like the act of playing D&D seems like it could be beneficial for rehabilitation in general, because a lot of the time, for at least certain kinds of violent offenders, part of their activity stems from cultural pressure, stems from what's expected of them, what the social norms are where they're at. And that is something you are released from when you're playing a tabletop game. You get to assume the role of a hero who's not bound to that kind of social structure. And I think that can be really useful, like for a reason we discussed earlier in relation to how it can help mental health. Because in a lot of cases, recidivism and violent crime is due to either need for resources because they're struggling and they have to, or because of social structure. They can only see themselves in jail, or else they're expected to act in a certain way in order to maintain their position in society, whatever, however they enjoy that. As a, it's a whole thing. It's a whole thing.
If we can, as a species, if we can learn to put ourselves in each other's shoes, we can, and at such an intimate level, at such an immersive level that role playing offers, then I think we can start on the path towards that Star Trek future where there's less war and more good for everyone. And that's why I like that idea a lot.
I think it's a nice idea. I'm hoping that in the future we're going to see more and more ways that games can be used to, help people, to help them adjust, to help them learn new things. We're in an era where simulationist games are used to teach new skills. For example, like Minecraft, you can learn how to mine and craft. This is really useful.
Lava chicken.
It's a thing. It's a thing. Like I think we'll see more scholarship on this, more deployment of tabletop gaming and video games that are designed to work through certain experiences. There's a lot of potential here. It's something we're just beginning to explore.
Well, imagine you're a teenager and you're just about to enter the job market, and you're like, I don't know, maybe I want to do computer programming. Maybe I want to be like a tennis athlete, or maybe I want to be like a scientist. Well, imagine if you're 17 and you're like, I could just go to the library and check out the role-playing experience of being a scientist for 10 years and see if that's for me. That would change a lot about how people structure their careers and their choices in life, because they would have that opportunity to experience it before they commit to it. Just saying.
Yeah, and like if we're getting into like really futuristic stuff wherein you have elements of dilated time, there's the chance to accomplish meaningful work in that kind of simulationist space. Like if you're able to go through a year of doing lab work in a virtual environment in about a day, then you can do a lot of useful stuff in that environment. This is the next evolution of how we trained Grok to yell at us by clicking on traffic lights in these images.
Oh, God. We got a comment from Micah. It says, man, I can't wait for a VR tabletop RPG app that actually looks good. Imagine playing a Dark Heresy campaign and it looks like you're actually there, kind of like Sword Art Online. I, too, dream of this day, Micah.
I can't wait to max out on insanity points and turn into a chaos spawn IRL.
Micah says, children do yearn for the mines. Are the aliens invading where you're at? Is that what we're hearing?
I think so. Forgive me.
it was a boom. It was like a it was like a Chris Nolan movie.
That's the sound of me turning into a chaos spawn.
It's
very subtle.
Got a comment of Hawk here. Says RPGs are a nice way, but there are a lot of socioeconomic changes that need to take place first to reduce repeat offenders of violent crimes. I clearly I was, being oversimplifying this, and you're right.
We're not pitching role-playing games as the solution to all of society.
No, God, no. Please don't walk away from this thinking that I am a saying that role-playing solves all problems, because it doesn't. But it can move humanity in a direction that I think would benefit everyone. So
maybe we just need the right game.
I said so prior to 5th edition D&D, back through the 4th edition days, I was convinced that D&D was on the way out. Pathfinder was outselling it, and people seemed very dissatisfied with their experiences with D&D, and it seemed like Hasbro was kind of flailing on how to get people involved with with this property. And there's still a lot of things that they don't do that I think they should do, like a new animated series, some toys, board games, stuff like that, stuff that Hasbro's really good at. But at the time, one of the things I said often was a new edition of the game is not going to solve the problem. Well, I was wrong. I was very, very wrong, because Mike Merle's designed 5th edition and it was amazing, and Critical Role came out at the exact right time, and everybody was like, holy shit, this is awesome. And D&D took off again, and it went back to the top where it frankly should belong. And so, yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe just the right game hasn't come along yet to... Who knows? The future, there's a lot of potential, I guess is what I'm trying to say. There's a lot of potential in role-play games to be beneficial to humanity.
You know what game is going to save the world?
What?
Our officially licensed Ninja Scroll tabletop
yes
RPG coming soon. That's going to solve all of society's ills. Just you wait.
We're going to have to brainstorm a title for that thing one of these days. Devils of Kimon is my first thought, but
Ninja Roll.
Strong. Ficano points out after the 4E license event that they repeated with 5th edition, they were absolutely at their lowest since 2nd edition. It seemed that way. It definitely seemed that way to me. I'll go with that.
Yeah, we're going to have a talk about D&D at some point at length, and that's going to turn into like group therapy for a couple of sections.
Well, first of all, I want to go over the editions, and then I think we should do a tier list.
I'm down.
Because people love tier lists, and the lore seeker community loves tier lists.
We can do a tier list for every book ever written for 3.5.
Oh, no. Let's not do that.
It'll only take like 10 hours.
My beloved Book of Nine Swords.
Yeah, dude.
The Book of Weeaboo Fighting Magic. I love it so much. Absolutely my favorite book for 3.5. Do you have a favorite book for 3.5?
Ooh, a very favorite?
Complete Adventure is pretty good.
Complete Adventure is good. I'm thinking back to like what I have for source books. Like I have like a whole stack of these in my closet. I've read them in years. Complete Arcane, pretty cool. I think there was some book that had a lot of like templates that I liked quite a lot. I fantasized about making a gargoyle template character for some reason or another.
Yeah, was that the Player's Handbook 2, maybe?
Possibly, because there were a couple like numbered handbooks. I'd have to look. I'll get out my entire stack for doing a D&D coverage, because I have these in storage. Just like my parents, my poor parents tolerated me buying all of these, right? Oh my God. I, of course, had no one to play with, and they were like, what are you doing, Vera? Why do you have these? Oh my God.
It's so cool that your parents are accepting of that kind of thing. I was lucky. My dad bought me my first D&D set back in '83, and he's gamed with me a couple times since then. So I've managed to get him involved and try it out. But it was something that my parents were actively like, yes, do this, go ahead and do this. And only later in life did I realize, it was like, well, they're probably looking at it like, hey, we know where he is. He's definitely not doing drugs. He's not getting anybody pregnant. It's like the safest and most reasonable way to spend the weekend for teenagers in the Deep South. It was a win-win as far as they were concerned.
You can do worse.
You can do a lot worse.
Yeah, I was a bit of an odd child. I remember we were on vacation one time, and I insisted on bringing a bunch of my 3.5 books, and I was scrawling like homebrew material that I would never use for a campaign setting I was trying to invent while my family was having dinner. Like, what are you doing in there? I'm writing stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's a creative. That's one of the things I also love about role-playing games. It's inherently creative. It is a creative endeavor. It is art. It is art that has seeped into almost every aspect of our current world.
Yeah, like games are a new form of art. They are a new sort of media. Interactive media is a modern contrivance. I think we're all really excited to see where it goes. It's a
as long as it's not Bored Ape NFTs.
Let's not gamify those anymore. Let's put that away.
Yes, let's definitely do that. Final thoughts, Vera.
I'm pretty stoked that D&D has led to the current scape of gaming. I think that games are art. The games are wonderful. I'm excited that I've been able to center so much of my life around games. I am excited to continue on that trajectory for the foreseeable future. Any thoughts, Ross?
Yeah, so I want to first apologize to anybody who tuned in and was not expecting like this really deep scholarly dive. I appreciate you guys being patient with me because this is a topic I was desperate to dive into and really roll it out, and I did. This is probably my most researched, most annotated, most scholarly approach to any of the topics we've covered on this channel. So first of all, appreciate your patience. Second of all, this is not a typical episode of Lorebeards role playing. We're gonna have episodes where we make characters. We're gonna have episodes where we do a deep dive on a particular system or a particular game. We'll have guests on. We're gonna have a guest come talk to us about Nordic LARP, and we've had guests talk to us about the development of certain games. So this channel is not just, to be clear, this is not just a dry scholarly, Bueller, anyone?
But once in a while, it's hey, game designers talking about ludology.
Yeah, once in a while, it's going to be a very in-depth, like, put on your thinking caps because Ross is going to go crazy about ludology again.
I enjoyed this a lot, though. Thank you so much, everybody, for hanging out today. This was cool. I had a lot of fun. This is intriguing.
Yeah, big thanks to everybody for showing up, and we will see you guys on next Monday for more Lorebeards and role-playing.
See you soon. Keep it real. See you in April.
That's right. Cheers.
Bye now.